Hey, folks. All right. Happy New Year. My bad. Look, I was about to beat up one of my neighbors. We'll talk about it another time. Anyway, Happy New Year. Hopefully, my sound is cranking the way it should be cranking. I did not even test to make sure I'm using the right mic here. So, hopefully, the sound is right. I don't know if y'all can hear me or not. Have the right mic on here. Can you guys hear me? Because I'm praying to God that I have the right mic set up. I didn't get a chance to double check. If not, we'll just have to hear through my. Okay, it sounds fine. All right. I don't know if this is on or if it's coming out of my MacBook. But okay. Happy New Year. Happy everything. Happy life. Happy everything, right? We have a lot to cover. I don't think we're going to get through it all, but we are going to make it work. But anyway, like I said, Happy New Year. Hopefully you guys have all of the wonderful goals and things that you're all trying to accomplish. For me, I just have several projects I want to get finished, right? I'm looking forward to a great 2024. I've been working hard for all of 2023 and a lot of 2022 on a lot of things, and everything is finally like at the cusp of completion. So this will be a great creative year. I'm not talking about YouTube, but just like things outside of YouTube. So I'm looking forward to that. For the book club, like I said, the book club will pick back up in February. So you guys can start sending your suggestions. Like I told the book club, we want something a little bit happier for this go round. I'm still not 100% sure about the genre. We normally do a lot of nonfiction, but I'm totally up for literature. I'm totally up for anything. So for those who are part of the book club or would like to join and have suggestions, feel free to shoot me an email, calvinbmichaels@gmail.com, with your book suggestions. I'll make the selection, or I'll make a few selections closer to February, and then I'll let you guys vote on what books you want or what book you want to cover. Thank you, Lil 3D. I appreciate it. All right. So that being said, it's so interesting when we have MLK Day because you constantly see like the same hoopla every year, right? And so for me, as great as Martin Luther King Jr. is and was, and how wonderful his legacy is, it's triggering to constantly see the worst of the worst people try and either utilize this man's name to push further propaganda or, political agendas that have nothing to do with what it was he actually fought for. And it's even worse when you just realize that, there's so many people who now quote him falsely in order to weaponize what it was he fought for, to literally continue to seam rip the progress that he fought for. And so when I start seeing a lot of these elected officials start giving their Martin Luther King, the same quote they use every year or the same speech they say every year, they got it in the drafts in the Gmail, right? Oh, it's almost that time. Let me go ahead and pull this back up again and retweet it. The same messaging go, he was such an upstanding man. He fought for equality. And then they get to the content of the character and blah, 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 blah. The same thing they're going to say every time, but then they end up being some of the worst people in the world. And they're actively fighting to seam rip and gut any and every element of progress that has ever existed in regard to Black America, right? And so for me, I almost wanted to be like, white folks, y'all ain't allowed to celebrate Martin Luther King Day no more because y'all on some BS right now. So you know what? All of y'all hang it up. Y'all need to go to work on next Monday, 2025. Y'all don't need to take the day off anymore because y'all been showing y'all behinds for the last few years. So this holiday is not for y'all anymore. And scratch Juneteenth off as well, okay? With love. And I just say that because when I talk about the idea of people weaponizing what it is this man has fought for, look at what's been happening in policy, where now even something like affirmative action has now been reversed, and the argument was, well, that's not equality. You're picking people not based on merit, but you're picking people based on the color of their skin. That's racist. And how many times have we seen a post where somebody who is not who falls under the minority bubble, me, I'm all about blackness and blackity black, but for the sake of the argument, when there's somebody who's white, or sometimes people who are in the Asian community who don't get into a program, the first thing they do is, oh, I didn't get into Yale. I didn't get into Harvard. I didn't get into a state school. And the first thing they say is, it's because Darnell and Adriana and them are in my seat, affirmative action, people who shouldn't be there. And so we've watched people go and fight and claw. We watched affirmative action get gutted. We've seen so many things with policy, whether it be housing. We've seen what's been happening with Edward Bloom, who we spent a lot of time covering, how he's fought against the Fearless Fund, which again, a fund that was aimed at helping Black women business owners get support for their businesses. Small grants of what, $20,000, $25,000, when we already talked about the little amount of capital venture funding that Black businesses get that are owned by Black women. And folks jumped in and said, no, that's not fair. Why is that only Black women are getting something? That's not equality. And so now that's something that's headed to the Supreme Court at some point in time. You know, and it's to the point where, again, the appellate court has already said you guys have to stop and pause funding until there's a higher agreement coming from the Supreme Court. Like, y'all can't even support these businesses. So $25,000, which again, when we're talking business, that's nothing, right? $25,000 is nothing for a business compared to some of these multi-billion-dollar businesses. $20,000 is barely enough for the company Christmas party, right? That's barely enough to even buy incentives for everybody on the team to do well. But again, that's a problem. So we've seen so many people just continue to weaponize this man's legacy in order to push, again, the status quo, all in the name of protecting whiteness and at the discretion and at the expense of Blackness, at the expense of Black people. And so we're constantly seeing it. You're seeing it with what's happening with schools. And again, there's this whole move to privatize education and everything. And they start talking about school choice and start talking about how the parents are disenfranchised and it's discrimination. And we're in this space where calling out the wrongs and the ills of society are now, you know, there's those blanket statements that they put everything in. So now, you know, you have the thing of woke. We have the conversation of what was everything in 2023? Woke, CRT. Now the move is get rid of everything that's DEIA, right? Diversity, inclusion. What's the rest of it? Diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. That's the next thing. Get rid of all of that, right? It's a problem, right? And so here we are now, where again, the very thing that this man fought for, the very thing that is constantly celebrated every January, and then they'll bring it back up in February for Black History Month before they take the posters down on March 1st, right? You know, they'll continue to bring up all of the great things with Martin, all of the great things. But then again, when I'm looking at the policy people get behind, the policy people vote for, the public figures that people like to fight and defend, I'm just like, this is some nonsense. So going to my main point that I was getting at with this, I really believe, and I've said this a lot of times, when it comes to policy and things that we are fighting for, specifically Black folks in America fighting for things in regard to what is happening with Black America, because of how things are working systemically, the narrative has to shift in regard to what it is that we really want. It can't just be about feelings anymore, right? When we're talking about addressing the racial and the inequalities that exist, it can't just be about feelings. We now have to be in a space where when we're talking about policy, you have to show outcomes, right? You have to show cause and effect, right? You have to show exactly, not even just cause and effect, but the origin. Because the thing is, Americans love to play stupid and act like anything that happens is the fault of the people who are disenfranchised. That's the narrative. You know, Black people live in the hood because they don't work hard enough. Black people have all of these health complications because all they do is eat soul food every day. How many times have we seen that narrative where it's like people try to police how we eat? Yeah, y'all just can't eat fried chicken and greens and macaroni and cheese and yams and rice pudding and bread pudding and all of the puddings and sweet potato pie and banana pudding every day, when in reality, we're not cooking that every day, right? That's a special Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, maybe Mother's Day, maybe a special Sunday kind of meal. Nobody has the time to do that every day, but people have created that narrative. But again, everything is cause and effect. So the issue should be more so now when we talk about anything we're fighting for, whether it's understand affirmative action will be back on the docket in some years. I see it coming already. But things with affirmative action, fair housing, inequalities in healthcare, inequalities when it comes to just food assistance, government assistance, anything that exists, the conversation has to go to a place of cause and effect. The origin has to be shown, and not even just the origin, but why it's the origin, what created that origin, what was happening while that origin formulated, who were the people backing that origin, who were the people who supported it, who were the people that legislated policy, who were the people that enforced that policy. Then we get to cause and effect. What happened when that policy was implemented? Who did it affect? How did it affect them? Why is it that they're in a specific situation now that nobody else is in? Like, you have to piece all of these dots together. And I think what unfortunately happened in the past was that a lot of the language and the verbiage on a lot of the bills that were passed coming out of the civil rights era, coming out of the 70s and the 80s, was everything was very broad. Because for the longest, I think as Black people, we've always included everybody in our struggle, right? Everybody is welcome to join. Like, everybody come together. So we're going to fight for everybody, which is commendable. Lovely. But the problem is everybody wasn't really rocking with us. A lot of people used our movements, used our fight, used our plight to further themselves, and then they jumped ship. Not only did they jump ship, they got on a rival ship and that ship started shooting at ours, right? And so here we are. So they got their bit and they said, all right, we'll see you later. All right, actually, you know what, y'all in the way. These waters are just for us. Y'all got to move, right? And so now here we are, where we have a whole bunch of nonsense going on. So we really have to get into the space of understanding the language, because what you're witnessing in real time, we've watched 30, 40, 50 years of progress be gutted in months with all of these landmark Supreme Court cases, with what's happening at the state level, what's happening at local levels, what's even kind of happening globally and how that affects us here. Just understand there's a lot of nonsense going on. And so like I've always said, this is not the time to tap out. This is the time to really focus and take note of what's happening. Really look at things from a bigger perspective. Don't just live in the short term. Don't just live in the now, because a lot of times when you only live in the now, you're just always reactionary and you're always emotional. And I want to say this, there's nothing wrong with being emotional, but when it comes to the policy, when it comes to getting things done, we have to put emotion to the side. But it is totally understandable to be emotional and reactive to nonsense, because we're human beings. That's how we move. Things offend us. Things piss us off. Things make us cry. Things make us want to go out in the streets and kick trash cans over. Yes, but when it gets down to legislation, when it gets down to policy, when it gets down to implementing a plan, finding who those actual organizers are that can get the work done. I'm not talking about self-appointed leaders that just spend all their time in the media and they're the face of everything and no work has been done yet. I'm talking about people who have been in the trenches for years with no funding, no support. They give their any and everything and their all to fight for what it is that they believe in, and they have been trying to build coalitions with no resources. These are the people you need to follow, the people who have done the research, the people who know what they're talking about, the people who may necessarily have done something on a smaller scale level, at a local level in their community, but they're getting results. That's kind of the folks you got to start paying attention to. We have too many folks right now that have massive platforms that are out here just saying any and everything, and it's because a lot of them at this point are driven by their ego. Not by actually wanting the collective to do better, not by wanting things to actually progress for not just our generation, but the generation after. A lot of these folks are now in a space where it's about me, myself, and I. I want credit for everything. If you're not giving me my credit, then you can't get my resources. I'm not going to let you in with what I learned. It's just, you got to come through my paywall and find out what it is I'm about to tell y'all, because I'm going to drop some gems. And so it's a lot going on. It's a headache. But pay attention, because again, like I've been saying for the longest, we're in a space where so many are cementing the nonsense. Right? So many things are being cemented. Look at what's happening when we talk about policy. We have states right now that are gutting nonpartisan voting and election committees. Why do you think? They're going to make sure 2020 never happens again. If they can find ways to now, even overturn elections. We have states that are trying to push different legislation that will allow certain committees to just say, we didn't like the results of that election, so we're just going to overturn it. We didn't like how that one went, so we're going to overturn it. Like stuff that has no merit. And again, it's not even based on actual votes. It's not based on what actually happened. It's based on folks who want to maintain and uphold a status quo by any means necessary. So we will just scam our way through everything. We will just do any. And again, understand, whiteness will always protect BS if it means the status quo is protected. Okay, that's how we're always able to witness all of these crazy things just slide. That's how you can have somebody still be the front runner in a presidential election and has 91 counts against them. Make it make sense, right? And so you have that happening. You see what's happening with gerrymandering. Every other month, there's a new case about gerrymandering in districts that are not properly drawn, or districts that, again, disenfranchise Black voters. We've even got to the point where the Supreme Court told certain states, your map is jacked up. Let's talk about Alabama. Your map is jacked up. You have to redraw it. What did they do? They just said, we just not going to do it. We're going to redraw it, but we're going to pretty much do the same thing we already did. And so be it. All right. So it's to the point where the Supreme Court's like, we said what we said. You got to go back and fix it. Like, that's where we're at, where now people are moving to no avail because they recognize there's not a lot of consequence for their nonsense. Because again, status quo is always going to be protected, right? And so we're getting to the space where you're seeing people who want to pull more power from agencies that affect our livelihood, and recognize that a lot of times when you can pull the power from a lot of agencies, that affects regulation. That's what kind of plays a role into the conversation of where corruption comes in, right? If you can gut all of the agencies that kind of regulate and make sure that things operate in the way that they should, then, oh yeah, you can kind of get all of your cronies up in there and do whatever you want. So we're watching not only a system be dismantled, but not dismantled to make things better, dismantled to more so strengthen the status quo that's already out. That's where we're at, right? We talk about education and how education, there's a move to privatize it, right? And how there's just so many different things taking place. I've talked about what's happened in regard to even how they teach the kids right now, right? Let me go to my phone for one sec. I always talk about how textbooks are purchased in public schools. I always talk about McGraw-Hill and just the process of what happens with books. Because recognize, every child in America is not receiving the same education. They're also not receiving the same history lessons, which is why now, as we are all adults minus the children, you're seeing the discrepancies in how a lot of things are presented in regard to world affairs, the history of the United States, and so on and so forth. That's why I gave so much smoke to Nikki on that last video. But again, when we talk about different things, you're seeing a cycle. So the cycle we're in now, and I'm going to reference what I would like to call an origin of this same cycle. The cycle we're in now is dumbing down everybody. Get everybody to just be stupid. So attack the schools, restructure what's allowed to be taught in schools. We're going to bring the book bans, right? We're going to, again, have all of these scary, spooky terms, woke and CRT, and now, again, attack DEIA and everything else. And we'll still grandfather in terms like the race card. And then we're going to throw terms out there like reverse discrimination, reverse racism. Because, again, if we can center the idea of reverse racism, making it so that white Americans are victims of being called out on nonsense, then, yeah, we have a leg to stand on. So dumb everybody down, chop up the education system, gut the education system, privatize it, because when you can privatize it, there's no regulation. People can teach what they want. And with that being said, those who can't afford the fancy private schools, go down to the schools that are, again, are what? Bottom tier. Leave them in the bottom tier space. It makes blocks when it comes to access to further education as they become adults, because they don't have the credentials to get into a lot of these spaces. And then we jump into this conversation of merit. So going back, right? During the first decade of the 20th century, the UDC, that's United Daughters of the Confederacy, and the UCV engaged in a full-scale onslaught against the textbook industry. Each organization had formed its own historical committee, which, has McPherson notes, was commissioned to select and designate such proper and truthful history of the United States to be used in both public and private schools of the South, and to put the seal of their condemnation upon such as are not truthful histories. Hence, the committees focused almost entirely on censoring what was dubbed long-legged Yankee lies in textbooks that represented the North as noble defenders of the Union and the South as ignoble rebels. All right. By 1910, the historical committees declared mission accomplished. They had won, as books that taught the true history, true in quotes, by the way, history of the South poured into classrooms throughout the country. Yet these Southern educators did not rest on their laurels, believing there was still much work to be done. The committee's aim was not only to oversee and control the Southern narrative, as it was taught in Southern primary and secondary schools, but to also gain control of the Southern narrative in all publications, including trade and reference books. The leader of this formidable effort was Mildred L. Rutherford, a Georgia teacher and historian general of the UDC. This is where we get that, whatchamacallit, the history of Georgia, where the book had the quote. Then and this is about slavery. All right, one of the things they did was they restructured the conversation of slavery, made slavery sound not too bad. We've talked about this a few times, but it doesn't hurt to kind of give a re-up of a lesson, right? They had a great frolic. Even while working in the cotton fields, they sang songs. And, Black people love to sing, right? Just a great time. Slavery wasn't that bad, right? As a matter of fact, some of them actually had begged to stay. They didn't want freedom. Right? They didn't know what they were going to do because they weren't skilled. It was nothing but white people that showed them how to maneuver through society, taught them how to count. Like now, the narrative just changes. Now, a minute ago, we weren't allowed to read or count, but taught them how to count, introduced them to Jesus. They were just, almost what I would call feral. No sense of religion or spirituality. They were cannibals. They would throw everything out there. And if it weren't for us, these people would be down bad. And so we saved them from that crazy place that we took them from. And, we brought them here to this wonderful, lush land of opportunity that they are not a part of. Right. So that's where we get to that. So when we get to, again, we talk about the books, recognize when they said that the mission wasn't complete, it wasn't, because the next thing was we get to the textbooks. They start affecting all of the textbooks all around the United States. This is also why we ended up getting so many statues of Confederate leaders after the 1910s, right? Recognize that when the Civil War ended, there weren't no statues of Jefferson Davis and all these other people in 1889. There weren't. It wasn't until the Daughters of the Confederacy decided we want to change the narrative of what was said about our uncles, our dads, our husbands, our fathers, our grandfathers. We want to change the narrative. And so they fought and they clawed. And then you start seeing all these Civil War Confederate monuments being placed everywhere. And this is when we get into the emergence of people who all of a sudden latch onto their Confederate, heritage. People who, again, have no ties to the Confederacy. Just like I said in the Nikki Haley video, people whose relatives immigrated here in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s from Europe, and then they moved over to the West Coast. They live in Oregon. They live in Montana. They live in Wyoming, right? They live in North Dakota. They live in Wisconsin, states that have no ties to the Confederacy, and you got them running around flying Confederate flags talking about their heritage. So recognize that all of this was a ploy of a bigger conversation. And so when we're talking about that cycle, then we talk about what happens with the books. So when we talk about McGraw-Hill, and because this is one of the largest distributors of textbooks in our public schools, right? So McGraw-Hill initially creates their history book, and they go and they try to sell it to each state. As it gets to each state has their own rules with how things operate. But a lot of times the operation goes, there's a state level of educators who now pass everything down to the local levels within the counties a lot of times, or within the different jurisdictions of whoever is in charge with education. And then they have a special committee that is going to look at what the contents are in the book. Now, this committee is not composed of scholars who have went and studied history. This committee a lot of times is everyday folks from around the way. Right? Random people, sometimes public figures, but a lot of the times these people don't even have the range to talk about what's in the book. But they're going to look and they're going to say, take this out. We don't want that. Take that out. Take this out. Put this in. Take that out. And they send it back up to McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill makes the edits. All right, we're going to make the edits. Then they send it back down to the state level. And the state level, it goes and trickles down. And eventually, after a whole bunch of give and take and negotiation and changing things and take this out and add that, then we end up with 50 states that all have different versions of the same history lesson. And the challenge with that is the history lesson they all have a different moral, or they all have a different purpose, or they all have a different ending, and it has a different narrative, which makes everything conflicting, which is why as adults, so many of us have this game effed up in regard to American history. It depends on where you were born, where you were educated, and just how much you chose to accept and how much you chose to further your education outside of K through 12. And again, it doesn't mean going to college. It just means that you don't take everything as a grain of salt. You actually read books. You pay attention to what's happening in the world. You pay attention to what's happening in your state, locally. You pay attention to things that have taken place in the past, things that are projected to happen in the future. You look at everything from a full scale, not just what you were taught in K through 12. And then you said, well, I learned everything I need to learn. I got it from here. So right now we have a lot of folks who got it from here running the country, and that's a problem. So here we go. So here's the example. Now, this article was from the New York Times some years back, but what they did was they did a correlation between the differences between textbooks in California and Texas that had the same lessons. So for example, this was California's, right? White resistance to Black progress is covered completely different in two states. So for the California book, what they said was movement of some white Americans from cities to suburbs, and again, this is about white flight in the 1970s, was driven by a desire to get away from more culturally diverse neighborhoods, right? California notes the suburban dream of the 1950s was inaccessible to many African Americans. Then we get to the Texas version. All right. First of all, Texas says, some people wish to escape the crime and congestion of the city. Understand how coded that already is, right? So one says the idea of culturally diverse, blah, 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 blah. The other paints the idea of crime and everything. Who's the face of crime? Who has been created as the face of crime, right? Thanks to our media, thanks to just the American thought and the way of thinking, we have always been the face of crime, whether we want to be or not. Just like with crack, we're the face of crack users, when in reality, 2/3 of crack users are white, right? But that's just the way that things are set up. Texas does not. California and Texas sometimes offer different explanations for white backlash to Black advancement after the Civil War, from Reconstruction to housing discrimination in the 20th century. Southern whites resisted construction, according to McGraw-Hill textbook, because they did not want African Americans to have more rights. But the Texas edition offers an additional reason. After the Civil War, from Reconstruction to housing discrimination in the 20th century, Southern whites, I'm sorry, I read the same part. Let me start that over. Southern whites resisted Reconstruction, according to McGraw-Hill textbook, because they did not want African Americans to have more rights. But the Texas edition offers an additional reason. Reforms cost money, and that meant higher taxes. Whole paragraphs on redlining and restrictive deeds appear only in California editions of the textbook, partly as a result of different state standards, those standards we talked about earlier. Texan social studies guidelines do not mention housing discrimination at all. That's the conversation of redlining. You wonder why a conversation of redlining really hasn't appeared until maybe the last 5 or 6 years? Because in most textbooks, it wasn't even a part of the conversation. And even if it was a part of the conversation, it was literally one paragraph. And they moved on. And it goes back to our conversation of origin, cause, and effect. You can't teach a history lesson on something if you haven't addressed the origin, the cause, and the effect. A lot of times, they just talk about the outcome and leave it at that. with no backstory, no setup, no context, and they move on. And this is why we have so many people who really don't understand race in this country at all. They still think racism is centered around feelings. They still think racism just means you call somebody the N-word, you call somebody some kind of racial epithet, and that's it. They don't understand that there's an entire system that backs it. It's backed by policy, legislation, and how things operate. None of that is ever a part of the conversation, right? Texas says that white Southerners oppose Reconstruction because of tax increases as well as racial resentment. California instead includes primary source quotations from Black historical figures about white resistance to civil rights. Here's another example. Teenagers in both states will learn about the Harlem Renaissance and debates about the movement's impact on African-American life. But Texas students will read that some critics dismiss the quality of literature produced. Understand that these tiny, small microaggressions are the things that chip away at conversations when we're talking about progress, because what it does is it puts these little tidbits in your child's head saying, yeah, well, we heard about all this stuff that was happening in Harlem and in the Black Harlem Renaissance and music and stuff, but it wasn't even really top tier. It wasn't really the greatest. It wasn't that great. This wasn't as great as what Beethoven and them were doing back in the day. So this is kind of like some bottom tier, one step from Chitlin Circuit entertainment and literature and architecture and art. It wasn't that great, right? So just putting those tidbits start to play a role. This is why a lot of times, even when you talk entertainment, especially with music and especially with literature, recognize that a lot of times when you see a critic's response to an artist that releases a book, that releases a novel, that releases a playwright, that releases music, notice that a lot of times when you have white critics, especially if they're critiquing the work of a Black woman creator, there's always this very condescending tone about the work. There's always this dismissive approach, right? And it's always coming from an authoritative standpoint, right? It's kind of like when we talked about Oh Boy from Rolling Stone, right? I forgot the cuckoo man's name. The guy that was talking about how all the folks were illiterate, and that's why when he had his 7 geniuses in music, Stevie Wonder wasn't a part of the conversation, or he didn't include somebody like a Jimi Hendrix or a Michael Jackson or Patrice Rushen or all of these great people. They weren't a part of the conversation. Aretha couldn't be a part of that because these people aren't literate enough to have a conversation about music in the same way that Bono can, right? This is what we're talking about. And so they talk about that. Let me see here. Texas says, did I read that already? Okay. Texas says that white Southerners oppose Reconstruction because of taxes as well as racial resentment. We got that. Both states say the breaches of racial etiquette led to lynchings after Reconstruction, but only California, whose edition was written more recently, makes clear that the perpetrators of these lynchings also hope to discourage Black political and economic power. Because again, that's another piece of the conversation. Why are Black people dealing with the nonsense they deal with after the end of slavery? Okay, it's not just because people hate Black folks. We know that that's one piece of it, but there's a fear of the power that Black people may gain by just getting the bare minimum. So we must do everything in our power to make sure that they don't have any of that. So here come the Black codes. Here come, everything else in regard to the lynching and all of these different things and just stupid rules like you can't walk on the same sidewalk as a white person. And when you walk, or when you step off the sidewalk, make sure you look down at the ground. If you look them in the eye, that's going to be a problem. And this is how we end up getting the conversation of the ordinances that would come out in 1910, starting in Baltimore, which would lead to redlining. Like all of this comes full circle, right? All of this plays a role. This is not just, little tidbits. I need folks to really understand all of this crap is connected and has always been. Which is why when folks be trying to fight me, I don't even lose sleep because I know I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm not doing this with y'all because at the end of the day, the folks that come to fight me the most have never done the research on it. They're moving off of feelings. They're moving off of the idea of, again, protecting the status quo. They don't have the range for the conversation, so the only thing they can do is throw insults. Anyway, with that being said, so we've seen what's happened with education, and that's how we even have things now like PragerU, right? Which I think I talked about in the last video as well, where now you have all these crazy pissed off conservatives who feel some kind of way because they don't like the way that America's starting to look in the history books, because now America's being exposed as a terrible country to everybody. But again, now we're watching the narrative change. We're watching how all of a sudden Christopher Columbus isn't a bad guy. And yeah, he went to Hispaniola and they killed a whole bunch of folks, but they had to do that in order for us to have the great things we have, right? That's kind of the nonsense that we get in regard to PragerU. And so PragerU approaches everything very differently. So when you're talking about the conversations of police brutality and police killings, PragerU has this very whimsical approach to kind of make it seem like it's not that bad. It's more so just when folks do things that are out of line, things just have to happen. And so PragerU is now being pretty much instituted in a lot of our K through 12 institutions all across the country. Lots of schools, especially in Florida and a few other states, are locking into PragerU. And understand, PragerU is not a university. It is not an academic institution. This is rich, wealthy white men who have a vendetta and have a purpose. And their purpose is to, again, change and control the narrative of how they want to be seen and how they can protect the status quo that already exists. That's what that's about. But a lot of people are under the assumption that PragerU is a university. It's not. All right. Anyway, with that being said, and then you look at the other things that are being submitted. Look at what's happening with media and how our media is compromised. And again, when I say things are full circle, let me put things back into perspective. So when I talked about the Daughters of the Confederacy and how they wanted to change the narratives, right? That was a disgruntled group of folks who didn't like the way that they felt they were being portrayed, right? Because again, they center themselves in everything. Everything is about them and how they feel and what makes them feel great and what makes them feel sad. Everybody must be collateral, right? And so they go and they make this mission. Compromise education, restructure the books. Let's get statues out there. Let's just change the entire narrative around the Civil War. And guess what? When we fast forward 100 years, you're going to have people who have no ties to the Civil War, who have no ties to the Confederacy, who their family doesn't even have a lineage here until after the 1920s, 1930s. But you have people who are fighting and clawing to protect the liberties of those who came out of the Confederacy. That's where we're at. Now we fast forward to modern times. We're in the same boat right now. Look at what's happening. When we talk about this whole anti-woke, you have Ron DeSantis. His entire platform is anti-woke this, wokey woke, 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 woke. Like no platform, just wokey woke, 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 right? And so that's his platform. He's painted that. You have other people who, again, are fighting to seam rip and gut and change progress that has been made. And so things are working full cycle because so many people are buying right into the nonsense, per usual. But I want to go even further because let me just talk about when I talk about compromised media. One of the things they never taught us was that during World War II, after the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, U.S. media was not allowed to show the images of any victims of the bombing. They were not allowed to show, people who had the burns and people who had been killed and people who had limbs and stuff missing. None of that was permitted until almost the 1950s. Why do you think they had to do that? Right? Because in order to get a country of hundreds of millions, I don't remember the U.S. population in the 40s, but at least it should have been, let's just Google it. I want to make sure my numbers are right real quick. Hold on, let me see. U.S. population 1945. Okay, 139 million people. So to get 139 million people to be okay with us dropping bombs on civilians, you have to paint the picture that it's more so collateral and you have to dehumanize and take the humanity out of the conversation. And so up until almost the 1950s, they were allowed to show the destruction. You could show the blown up houses. You could show the blown up buildings. You could show all of that because that shows the strength of America. That shows the power that we have. But you cannot show these babies that have died. You can't show these kids that have died. You can't show these fathers who were on the farms just trying to aggregate the little bit of land they had left that wasn't already bombed. You can't show that. And in addition, you cannot call these people victims of the atomic bomb. You have to call them, what did they say? I wrote it down. Where's it at? I wrote it down. Oh, yes. Victims of misfortune. That's what you can call them if you have to call them that. All right. And so for years, because a lot of Americans didn't even see the atrocities that really happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as far as how it affected the civilians in regard to their injuries, America was already just celebrating because the war was almost over. And the part that makes it crazy was Japan was almost pretty much done anyway. We really didn't even need to drop the bombs because if we want to be honest, Japan at this point had run out of artillery. All right. There were Japanese pilot fighters and everything. At this point, they were given orders that once you're out of ammunition, just crash your plane into an American target. You're gonna have to sacrifice and die for your country. Japan was at the brink of the war was almost over for them. They had nothing left. They were struggling along, bare minimum, barely holding on. At this point, the civilians also had to fight with whatever they had. If you had a stone, if you had a rock, if you had your own firearm, do what you got to do because we're losing the war. So many of our troops have already died, and so just do what you got to do. We were already gonna win. But, just to really double down and just highlight the amount of power the United States has, let's drop 2 atomic bombs on 2 civilian cities, not even military target cities, not even cities that were military, have military bases or setups, just civilians, right? We're going to kill mom, dad, grandpa, and a dog. And then this is where it gets interesting, where I talk about how narratives are painted, right? So then by the time we get to the 1950s, they're finally starting to show the images of what happened to the people who were victims of these bombs during World War II, right? Atrocities. And people are like, oh my God, these look horrible. But you know what? The United States loves a symbolism story. So there was a show called This Is Your Life. And so in 1955, they had an episode where they brought on what you call the Hiroshima Maidens. Now, the Hiroshima Maidens, this was a group of women. Some were little girls, some were babies when the bomb was dropped, some were adults. These were all women who ended up becoming disfigured because of those atomic bombs. Some, like one woman, her fingers had been mashed together. She didn't even have fingers anymore. All this was burned. This is just one, you know, just she smacked somebody. You know, that's all she could do. She could smack, but she could do a, you know, serious milli rock. But anyway, with that being said, so all of these women who have all of these just terrible injuries, life-changing, right? And so they decide, because this is around the time plastic surgery is starting to emerge and become a thing in the United States. You know, the United States made a deal where they're like, okay, we're going to have some of these, what you call Hiroshima Maidens, come to the United States and get reconstructive surgery. And so we're going to paint this to be a Cinderella story. But let me tell you how trifling things are. So with this same This Is Your Life show, they had one of the women who, again, a victim of this bombing. I can't remember what her full injury was, but just know she was all jacked up and done up, okay? And so she has this injury. This is before the plastic surgery. They bring her on the show, and guess who is also a guest on the show? I want y'all to take a guess. Let me read the chat real quick. Take a guess at who was on the show. Again, this is one of the burn victims from the bombing. Guess who is the guest on This Is Your Life, 1955. Somebody in the chat. Let me change this to live chat. It's on top chat right now. Did anybody get it? Thank you, course correction. The freaking pilot. I said, y'all gotta be kidding me. When I read that, they had the pilot that dropped the bomb on this girl's neighborhood on the show. And they tried to milk it and make it this wonderful, whimsical conversation. Oh, something, like, are you effing serious? And what ended up happening was it became this rags to riches story. And it was like, yes, the U.S. is doing this great thing because they're giving these women, you know, a second chance. And they're going to be, because this is really the time of American exceptionalism and symbolism, because we're now in the 50s. America's starting to thrive. The rest of the world is still rebuilding after the war. We had the luxury of the war not being fought on our soil outside of Pearl Harbor. So, you know, we didn't have to really do too much recovering from the war. We jumped right back into life. And so this is the period of just American innovation. And we have plastic surgery. We have the best doctors in the world. And so, yes, we are going to just show the kindness of our heart and do these surgeries for free. We're not even going to charge these people. It's going to be for free, right? And so they paint this narrative. And yes, they give all these women free plastic surgery. Most of the women were able to get somewhat of the results they want. There were some that couldn't. I think 1 or 2 women passed. But just understand, when we're talking about how compromised media is, how did we get from killing, you know, hundreds of thousands of people with a bomb to all of a sudden this whimsical Oprah Winfrey type talk show where now the girl's gonna come out with her new face and her 2 fingers that can now move, and the audience is standing up and clapping, and somebody's got a tissue wiping their eyes? Be for real. Okay, so this is kind of the nonsense I'm talking about. And so just recognize that, again, that idea of a whimsical narration, this is kind of like even in DC, I think yesterday or the day before, even when you're talking Israel and Palestine or with Gaza, right? You just had this huge protest of 400,000 people in DC who are like, this crap needs to end. Ceasefire. At this point, y'all are just blowing up everything and anything. This is ridiculous. Why are we still here, right? How many of y'all actually saw any of that in the news? Barely in the news. Barely mentioned. You know, if you weren't on social media, if you weren't looking at Twitter or TikTok, you probably wouldn't have even known that took place. And it wasn't even just in the United States. Same thing was happening in the UK. So when you talk about CNN and BBC and a lot of these major news networks who chose not to talk about it because they spent all day talking about Iowa and the caucus, this is what I'm talking about. So recognize media is super compromised. And that's all about that conversation when we're talking about things coming full circle. And one of the reasons why I think about, even when we're talking about police brutality killings, they never stopped. There's still a whole bunch of folks who are unarmed being shot and killed by the police. But why do you think you're not hearing about it in the media as much today? Right? Because they don't want a rehash of the spring of 2020. Spring of 2020 had folks shook, right? Because they didn't, you know, they figured, okay, it'll just be another situation. They protest and they go home. But no, the George Floyd situation just got so intense where now nationwide protests in almost every major metropolitan city and small towns. And then it went global all around the world on every continent, not including Antarctica. But I'm sure if they had enough people out there who would have bared in the cold, they would have been out there too. People in Asia, people on the continent of Africa, people in Australia, of all places. I was like, listen, y'all got enough problems over there too. So y'all might want to take care of home, but thank you for your support. Like, you know, Europe, South America, places in Central America, all of these places protesting, right? And then what happened? Businesses got shook. This is when all the businesses were like, oh, we're going to pledge $50,000. to diversity inclusion. We're gonna donate the 200,000 to the Black this, that, and the third. We are creating a neighborhood initiative for Black freedom. Just all kind of initiatives, and everybody was donating and promising, and then none of that money came. Because as soon as things died down, everybody moved on and like, all right, we changed our mind. We taking that back. We're gonna take that. Okay, we reel that back like a fishing pole. Just reel that on back in. We done. You know, we put this on up. That's done. That was fun. So that's why I always say don't jump into symbolism nuggets, because if the work isn't done, it's easy for symbolism to take the place of progress. It's easy for symbolism to take the place of completion, right? And so that's how we get to that. And so again, it's not even just major media, because even with social media, right? Twitter at this point, or excuse me, X, look at how many times X or Twitter will censor a trending topic, yank it down so nobody's talking about it. Understand George Floyd was the last one. George Floyd, he was it. He was the last major trending topic about a Black person, you know, just getting the kind of treatment they get from police to that extent where it just goes around the world. They said that's never going to happen again, right? So every time there's an opportunity for things to trend, it doesn't, because of the algorithm. Look at TikTok. TikTok will yank a video down so fast, real quick, because they just want you to dance. You know, you need to just go ahead and have the dance ready, right? All day. All day. That's TikTok. So every time there's something that's actually happening and information can spread super quickly, then I got it. No, nope. There's a new dance challenge I need to jump into. And so just understand there's so much nonsense going on. I did not mean for this opening segment to be this long, but hey, I got in my soapbox. I started feeling some kind of way, right? But just recognize there's just, it is ridiculous what's happening. So please, like I've always said, do not tap out. I get it. I am over almost everybody in politics. I can't stand everybody get on my nerves right now. I don't like nobody. I kind of just want to beat up everybody myself. But understand that the current space we're in now dictates what's going to happen later down the line if we're not careful. And if we all start tapping out, and again, we let our feelings and emotions get in the way of progress, our feelings and emotions get in the way of reality, and we're not looking long term. And I want us, especially us younger folks, I guess I'm still young. Yeah. I want us younger folks to also remember too, because one thing I don't like, right? And I think this is a layered conversation. When we're having these conversations, I really don't like when we hound and pound on like the older Black generation, like our grandparents and great grandparents, the ones who are 80 and 90, who are one step from going on to glory, right? Understand that I don't think it's a great idea for us to be so selfish with what it is that we're fighting for, that we allow grandma and grandpa to be collateral. We allow their social security to be gutted. We allow their health care to be compromised because we got to teach a lesson to somebody else right now in the moment because we feel some kind of way. Like, I want us to be very careful with that slippery slope. Just understand, because listen, because the world will let it happen, right? We saw what happened in COVID with 2020 and how all these white politicians who wanted the country to open back up said, you know, our grandparents and senior citizens, they love America so much, they're willing to die to save this economy. I said, y'all just not saying anything. So you got to deal with that nonsense. And then 5 minutes later, them Angel Blue jet fighters fly over your head. I don't know if they were doing that where y'all live, but I know in DC, when we were still in the quarantine, everybody was in the house, everybody stressed out, tired. 2 in the afternoon, them fighters just, I'm like, what is this supposed to do? Apparently that was symbolism. That was supposed to show the strength of America. Meanwhile, everybody choking because can't nobody breathe. But I said, now how many millions did we spend on that? Because that could have went to more research on how to get us out of this BS. But anyway, but going back to Martin Luther King. Hold on, let me take a sip of my lukewarm tea that's not hot anymore. But anyway, going back to Martin Luther King, I just want to end this on a lighter note just because it made me think back, because one of the coolest things, you know, they had that Martin Luther King monument in DC. And it's kind of cool because when I think back, as a freshman in college, I was one of the people that got to work the ceremonial groundbreaking for that statue, which was really cool. This is when I was still at Howard. Something happened on campus. I can't remember what it was, but our dorm got in trouble. This is when I was in Drew Hall. And so we had lost visitation. Now, understand, when you are hormonal 18-year-olds, visitation was everything, because that meant if you didn't have visitation, girls couldn't come by, right? And so we were pressed to get visitation back. And I think Dean Lee at the time, he was like, the only way you can get your visitation back is you guys have to sign up for a special community event. But they didn't really tell us what it was, right? And he was like, if there's enough of you who sign up, maybe you can get your visitation back. So it had to be maybe 150 of us that signed up. And what we ended up signing up for was actually to work the ceremonial groundbreaking for the Martin Luther King Memorial. And so I was on the team that worked the VIP entrance. I don't know how I got on it, because at first they had me working in another segment, like, because this was like the ceremony was kind of, it was at the tidal basin, and they had these little fold up seats and everything. And mind you, they were flying George Bush in, and Barack Obama was coming in. This is before he was president. And they had all these celebrities. It was Maya Angelou and Nick Cannon and Russell Simmons and Oprah and who's the lady from Today's Show? I don't know, what one of the white women that does journalism stuff. So all of these women, right, and celebrities and everything like that, and the judges and all these different people. And so I was supposed to be way in the back at the peasant section of the event with the people who didn't get tickets, who just stood. And I remember it was raining. Like, we had these white plastic ponchos they gave us, but because I was one of the first people to sign up, right? I might have been the fifth or sixth person. They had a separate committee of maybe 8 of us who actually got to go and meet with the organizers for the whole event, right? And so it was kind of cool, because I had only been at Howard for, God, it couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 months. I don't even think we had got to Christmas break yet. I can't remember. But anyway, so I'm still adjusting to being in these spaces, because again, I'm from a small town called Spanaway, Washington. Our tallest building was Walmart. Okay, that's kind of what I came from. So, you know, I'm in some fancy office building. They got the cool fancy machine that gives you the water bottles, and they had snacks and candy and just glass all around and everything. And it was kind of cool. So we got to sit in, and it's a bunch of like super wealthy people and stressed out people, by the way, too, because this event was coming. Everybody was stressed out. It looks like deadlines weren't coming through. Certain performers weren't sure. They hadn't locked in certain PR people and stuff yet. And so I don't remember the lady's name, but I think she was Turkish. I think she was Turkish, because she had an accent when she was cussing us out, boy, because she was letting some of us have it at the event. But I remember yeah, somehow because of that, because like I said, I was supposed to be in charge of the group that was in the peasant section. I'm gonna stop calling it the peasant section, but that's how I looked at it. But anyway, they and I only say peasant section because every time I go to some place fancy, I always end up in a space where I'm not supposed to be. But anyway, so somehow I ended up getting moved to the VIP section, which meant that I was at the white tents in the back. All of the celebrities came in from the back, and then they'd have these golf carts and drive them to their respective segments. And so I'm standing here like passing these pamphlets, and it's crazy because I'm 18 years old. Here's Oprah. You know, my hand is shaking, trying to give her a pamphlet. And then Katie Couric, that's who I was thinking of. Katie Couric's coming. I'm like so nervous, just passing all these people the flyers. And I remember they rolled in by Angelou and everything, but her handler got the flyer from me. It was like me and 2 other people who were passing out the flyers, and they would go through that. And it was just a really, really cool day. I just remember it was raining, it was cold. But it was kind of dope. Now, I will say, all of us had on these white ponchos. We kind of looked like we were in Klan hoodies, to be honest. That's what it looked like when you look down the aisle. You see all of these like students that have these white ponchos on, you know, ushering and working the line. But we did look like we were in like some Klan hoodies, because if you could do like a bird's eye view of everything, I was like, this optic thing, you know, this ain't the right optics here. Maybe we should have some black ones on or something. But it was kind of cool to see that. And then kind of see where it is now, you know, years later, now that it's open. So pretty cool. Anyway, I'm gonna read some comments, because I'm not gonna be able to get to all of them, because we're already 47 minutes in, and I spent way too long on the first segment, and I still got like 8 pages to go. So please forgive me if I cannot get your comment. Please don't fight me. I'm just trying to be respectful of everybody's time. Okay. Okay. Can I scroll like that? Okay, my chat wasn't trying to scroll. All right, I'm just gonna pick some random comments here, so please don't take offense if I can't get to yours. Let's see, what do we have? It said that South Africa has to be the leader in common sense, but where are the Arab countries? They should have been the leaders. I'm guessing this is about the trial that they're putting against Israel in regard to everything happening with Gaza. It's so layered, to be honest. It's, well, one, because the United States is so far up Israel's behind, I think I don't know why this is moving the way that it's moving, because this should have been ended at this point. It's pissing me off the more I think about it. But a hot mess. That's all I'll say. Oh, look, all y'all had guessed that it was the pilot that was on the show. Exactly. Tyler said they're still doing that kind of mess today. That's more so about the symbolism nuggets I was talking about. Oh, it looks like I was freezing for a minute. Okay, my bad, y'all. Y'all know I get in my pocket, they be trying to shut me down. Christine said Christopher Columbus was a horrible man. Exactly. But no, they painted him to be wonderful. Oh, Jerry, that's a great point. Toni Morrison said her work was criticized as well. And I remember one of the criticisms she got was they were telling her, you don't have enough white people in your books. Like, why is all your books just centered on, your people? Again, that idea of centering yourself in everybody else's experience. And if you're not a part of it, then something must be against you. Like, that's what we're talking about here, right? Let me see. I'm gonna do a few more, and I want to keep going just for the sake of time. Bonita Gardner said it, and nobody sent that pledge money. That was a lie too. Like I said, look, so many of those companies like, we promised to send this and we're gonna send that, and we are with you. We freedom, right? And they do some more symbolism, and folks were taking knees. Everybody was taking a knee everywhere they could go, right? You be in the mall and somebody stop right in front of you to take a knee. I just want to apologize and let you know I'm with you, brother. Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, cool. Right. So, and now here we are. Now them the same people running in line to go vote for some more terrible stuff. It's interesting watching all them people in Iowa stand in -degree weather to make sure they can put the worst two people in the top two, Orange Man and DeSantis. I said, okay. All right. All right, I'm gonna do two more. Somebody said, this is my problem with people that encourage others to not vote. My elderly parents need that vote. Because my grandfather is 91, right? I be trying to make sure he good. Like, I don't got time for us to get in our feelings and then all kind of stuff gets stripped away. And then his, fixed income ain't coming in no more. And listen, he lives in LA. Y'all know, I think his house is paid off at this point, but still, taxes are skyrocketing, and especially because he doesn't live far from that big new SoHi stadium that they built. And I think there's another arena that they also built at the same time. Anybody in LA can tell you that the property taxes, especially around Inglewood and around South Central and around that whole like Crenshaw segment, where I'd say like the cross street is like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th Ave, all those property taxes are skyrocketing. Like that whole Crenshaw High School area, it's getting expensive out there, right? So yeah, you got to make sure your folks are good at the same time. When we're doing this, it's not just about our specific generation. You got to think about the generation before us and the generation after, making sure that everybody benefits. That's just all I want to say on that. It's a multi-layered conversation. There's other things to add to that, but I don't want to go that far tonight. I just want to fix this thing here before it starts messing up. Okay. Anyway, let me see. What up, Alan? Somebody say, can you talk about Jonathan Majors and his obsession with Coretta Scott King? Jonathan, just find somebody else, please. That's not what I'm saying. Coretta been through enough. I always think of, there's a picture from the funeral of Martin Luther King. And it's a picture, it used to, when I was still on Facebook like that, it used to be my profile picture for the longest, but it's a picture of, it's Coretta and she's holding the daughter. Like the daughter is like kind of laying in her lap and she's kind of just like looking down. And it's interesting because there's so much that could be said about that picture. Coretta, she always kind of had the same kind of distinctive face after that. She just always looked like the world is this terrible place, but she's kind of looking and it looks like she's trying to hold it together and be the strong one. And then the little daughter looks like her whole world just fell apart, but she feels comfort within her mom's arms. But almost like the comfort that she's getting from her mom's arms is the comfort that she misses from her father. And so I always think of that picture. But yeah, Jonathan, your situation, my friend, yeah, let's not start mixing this. You just can't mix all this up like it's a casserole, right? No pun intended. Like it doesn't work this way. Like find somebody else, please. Find somebody else, please, immediately. Thank you. All right, I want to keep going. Whew. Okay, this is lighter. I made sure I balance this out. I might do a separate review on this because I really enjoyed this film. I got a chance to watch American Fiction a few weeks back. I really recommend that you guys go and check out this film. I'm not going to give any spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it, but I thought it was a great watch. It's very thought-provoking. It's definitely, it jumps into the conversation about just how Black entertainment is consumed, how it's distributed, and what happens with the big ups in the offices. Great story, right? I love that Erica Alexander was the love interest. If you don't know, that was Pam off the Cosby Show. That was Maxine Shaw, attorney at law from Living Single, right? I love that she was the love interest. She's one of my favorite people, so I thought it was great. I loved her being in that role. And like I said, it highlights just again the way that entertainment moves around blackness. Now, I will tell you what was weird because I saw it at East Street Cinema, which is kind of like an independent movie theater out here. Um, there were a lot of white people in the crowd, and so anytime I see a movie that covers things around race, I always kind of scan the room to see who's laughing at what. There were some parts where I felt like I could laugh, but I was looking like, oh, I know y'all ain't laughing at this one. Some of y'all in here laughing a little too hard at stuff that should only be funny for me, because now I'm offended that you found that funny. But I was just like, yeah. So it was a great watch though. But yeah, and I think it really talks about just again the black experience in entertainment, in film, and it made me think to so many things. Like, really long story short, to sum it up, I promise you I'm not spoiling it. It's about a black author who had been trying to get published, like a major publishing deal, because he wrote these very complicated and thought-provoking books, but the books just were not being sold to the publishers because the publishers weren't interested. They wanted the narratives that they knew that would sell. They wanted the stories about the drugs and the guns, and you were living on the worst block in your neighborhood and somebody curb stomped your mama. Like, they wanted that kind of stuff. So his stuff could never sell. So he was like, you know what? I'm gonna write a parody book. So he jumped and wrote a book about every trope, negative stereotype as a joke. Didn't even take it serious. Like, he just was like, let me just put some BS together. I'm even gonna change the way that the person speaks. I'm gonna use a little bit more of the spicy wording, and the spicy diction, and the spicy vernacular. So instead of, hey, how you doing? I'm gonna put what up. Like, so that's how he wrote the book. And then what ends up happening is, the book blows up and his world is just turned around. So that's what the movie kind of centers on. That was my way of explaining it without spoiling it. But it is a great watch. But it makes me think of just how sometimes blackness can be very disposable in entertainment. I remember, and I talked about this in my podcast, one time I was in this independent movie called Jesus for Less. And the only reason I was in it, I was doing stand-up comedy at the time. And I finally started getting some legs, because this is when I was doing comedy in like Tacoma, Washington, Seattle metro area, right? And so I was finally getting some legs. The owner from Tacoma Underground had called me and was like, hey, I know somebody that needs somebody to play the dad. They need a black guy. It's like, oh, okay, sure, right? And so let me just tell you how funny and awkward this is. So when I get there, they tell me I'm playing somebody's dad. Now, at the time, I was 21. So we're shooting the scene. Now, I have no speaking role. I'm just sitting there, and I think I was supposed to nod my head and say something, right? And so I'm sitting there, and the guy that is playing my son is probably 20 years older than me. But they had no interest in really trying to properly cast. They just needed a black person to be in the spot. And so here's 21-year-old me. That's when my face was like super chiseled, and I was about 20 pounds lighter. Sitting there looking super, like none of this was here. I don't think I had a beard or my little goatee yet. None of this was here, right? Sitting there looking young and fresh faced, playing somebody's dad at their wedding. Like, when I tell you, a lot of nonsense happens in entertainment, which leads me to Taraji, who I want to get into. I want to say this, like I've always said, Hollywood has always been a game, right? And I think one of the things that takes place, because as we know, Taraji was really talking about how, she has dealt with a lot of nonsense in Hollywood. Now, she's been at this since the 90s. She's been in this game for almost 30 years. She's done tons and tons of movies, whether it's, Baby Boy or Hidden Figures or Proud Mary, or what else has she done? She's done all these movies. I can't think of them all, but there's a Diary of what's the other one? One of the Medea movies she was in. She's done Curious Case of Benjamin Button. She's done Hustle and Flow. She's done a lot of television. She was on Empire. She's been on all these different things. And so she's been in the game for a long time. But she talks about how, even with her being an A-list actress, and with her kind of being in a Karate Kid, that's a great one. Thank you, Natural Empress. What up, Natural Empress? But yeah, so she talks about, with her having all these roles that she's been in, and understand too the dynamics of the range that she has as an actress. Okay, she's not like a one-trick pony where when you see her in every movie, you're going to get the same thing. So she kind of talks about, again, just how she's been lowballed, right? And the challenge that I think we've seen, unfortunately, when it comes to Black Hollywood is, a lot of times people don't speak out about what the flaws are. You get a few anomalies here and there. Monique is going to talk about what nonsense is happening in Hollywood. Sometimes Gabrielle Union is going to speak out and say her 2 cents. There's a few people who call it out. Spike Lee will call it out when he can. But a lot of times, because the opportunities are already so limited, and the game is already so vicious, a lot of folks stay silent. They're just happy to be in a room, and they expect everyone else to be the same way. And then white execs and white media and everybody else do the exact same thing, and they think black actors and actresses are supposed to just be happy with the bare minimum, right? And so, again, when you really think about it, the issues that exist in Hollywood, especially for black actresses, it's the same nonsense from 20 years ago. When you start talking about the pay scales that some of these women are getting in these roles, it's almost the same pay scale from 20 years ago, right? You're not seeing a lot of progress. And I want to just give an example. So now Empire is kind of an anomaly because really it was only popping for that first season. And by season 2, a lot of us stopped watching. But understand that during season 1 of Empire, every episode gained more viewers with each viewing. So each episode got more viewers than the last episode, to the point where by the time the series ended on the 18th episode, I think it had 18 or 19 million viewers, which in this era of streaming and everything else was really, really good. Now, streaming was not as popular yet, but understand that TV ratings nationwide were just going down. And so then, with that being said, Taraji was making 150K per episode, which is a lot of money. Great, wonderful, love that for you. If we compare that to Friends, which by the time the show starts to wind down and the ratings have slowed down and people aren't as interested anymore, all of the 6 main castmates were making anywhere between $874,000 and upwards of $1 million per episode. Again, on a show that had ratings that were super high, but again, an American favorite during the prime night that they were on. Same kind of story for Empire, but just look at the discrepancy when we're talking about the pay, right? And so that's mainly because a lot of times in Hollywood and entertainment, they don't think that black women are bankable. And which is why you see some of the most dynamic performances from black actresses, but they never get their just due, right? And so, and when I say black women aren't seen as bankable, that's what the studios think. Their question is, are white men gonna go see the film? They know that black actresses, they know Viola Davis, they know Angela Bassett, they know Loretta Devine will be able to bring in black women. They know that they can bring in the black church demographic, the black auntie demographic. They know they can bring in black men. They know they can bring in black teenagers if it's the right kind of film. But where does that fall with white men? Are they going to come to these films? With white women, some of them might show up, but if their husbands don't want to go and they want to go see something else instead, they want to see The Beekeeper, then they're going to go see The Beekeeper instead of The Color Purple. You know what I mean? And so because of that, we've always seen this thing where Hollywood always lowballs black entertainers, period, especially the women, right? And so what I found really interesting is, like, I've seen her get so much flack for speaking out, which just kind of threw me off, because understand, like, if you've been in a field for 20, 30 years and you're still being treated like a bottom tier entertainer and you don't have the access to things that other people in your same respective work have, and sometimes you have better accolades than them, you've done more work than them, yeah, you should speak out, because recognize right now she is publicly carrying the burden for a lot of black women in entertainment. I would say the same for Monique. I will also say the same for Gabrielle Union, because recognize that every time they speak out, they just get the backlash. And I knew something was going on with Taraji when I saw that she had went to Bali or something for like a peaceful mind retreat where she just really needed to escape. I was like, there's something going on. But like, again, you keep seeing a pattern. When Monique spoke out, look at how bad she was dragged, right? When Gabrielle Union spoke out about what happened with America's Got Talent, oh, they painted her as difficult to work with right away. And then to make it worse, then you got Terry Crews and his goofy behind jumping in the mix where nobody asked him anything. He's, well, I mean, America's Best Guest was one of the best experiences I ever had. I'm like, you in the way. Terry Crews is another conversation, because then we start talking police brutality and everything that was happening with liberation movements, and he was just all in the way every single time. Ugh, get on my nerves. Anyway. But it's interesting because what happens is when people speak out, there's so many who kind of just want them to shut up and be quiet. Like, just shut up. You'll mess this up for the rest of us. Just keep quiet. And that's why I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed with Vivica, because Vivica's one of my favorite people, period. Vivica's one of my favorite actresses. She makes me laugh. I love her. And I do wish that when they asked Vivica her 2 cents about Taraji, because Vivica pretty much said, well, I'm good. I didn't experience that. And I get that. If that's her experience, I just wish that she would have given commentary that doesn't derail what it is that Taraji's fighting for, because she's not the only one. I remember Wanda Sykes talking about when she was offered a comedy contract and they were only for like a special with Epics, and they were only going to pay her $150,000, right? And so, and understand, Amy Schumer is getting offered 15, 20 million to not be funny. This is where we're at. So, you know, I just wish with Vivica that she would have kind of, you know, either you don't have a comment or whatever you say, you can talk about your experience and you can say, well, I hope, you know, with my experience, Taraji is able to experience the same thing, as opposed to centering it on, well, I got mine and I'm good, so I don't know what y'all talking about. Because then when we get to that space, that's a pattern we see in a lot of things where black people call out things that don't add up collectively. And then individuals who have become the anomaly make their anomaly and exceptional experience the experience for everybody. And then what happens is people who are at the higher ups, people who are the powers that be, latch onto that anomaly and say, well, see, Vivek says she's good, ain't no problem, right? It's kind of like when people go and get a black person that will align with a racist white person, say like, hey, my friend thought it was funny that I said the N-word. He's not offended. Why are you tripping, right? Right? You keep talking about Martin Luther King having a dream, but you keep waking him up every single time you complain. Like, that's kind of what that looks like. So Vivica, do better, please. And I was gonna say something, but I'm gonna be respectful, so I'm gonna keep it to myself. But case in point, because now we have DJ Vlad. Now, I told you, I do not support Vlad TV at all. I have an issue with this random white Russian man taking advantage of all these black entertainers who are fool enough to keep going on there and interviewing, and then they telling themselves, get themselves caught up. And this is somebody who, in my opinion, just exploits everything about black entertainment, everything about black culture. He has now opened his mouth and was like, Taraji's boohooing. She's a rich person. Nobody cares about her rich people problems, blah, 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 blah. And I want to say this, too, because I've also seen some people who, again, they call themselves self-appointed leaders or whatever, who've also had certain things to say about kind of the work that she does. And some people have dismissed it like, yeah, y'all are actors, blah, 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 blah. This isn't even real work. You guys aren't teachers. You're not doctors. Understand that if somebody is passionate about what it is that they do and they get paid to do it, that is their job. That is their livelihood. That is what they have worked for. That is what they become. And understand, people like to get into this space where they act like entertainment is not important. Understand that in the same way that we have to fight and claw and go against all the nonsense, you need something to counterbalance all of the trauma that we fight against all day. You need something to counterbalance all of the anxiety, the stress, all of the horrible things that we have to see about ourselves and read about ourselves when it comes to policy. You need something to counterbalance that, because if you just always sit in a position of being reactive and sit in a position of being offended and sit in a position of being pissed off and sit in a position of being hurt and sit in a position of being afraid and a position of being worried, what do you think ends up happening? Here comes the hypertension. Here comes the heart disease. Here comes the cancers. Here comes all the different things. Here comes the alopecia. Now your hair is falling out. Now your hair is thinning out and everything else like that. Here comes the poor diet. You realize even with a lot of stress, you can have diarrhea just from being overstressed. Not that you could eat all of the right things, but you know what? If your body is so traumatized and locked into stress, you can end up in a space where you have irritable bowel syndrome. You can end up in a space where you got diarrhea for weeks at a time. So yes, entertainment to an extent does have its element of importance. Entertainment is what gives us our escapism, to kind of just let us refuel, get inspired with whatever it is, because entertainment has so many realms. It's books, it's music, it's TV, it's theater, it's dance, it's all of these different things. So to constantly try to paint this narrative that as Black folks, the only thing that we should give, our focus to is everything happening in the world, and we need to talk about it, and we need to be soldiers, and we just got to do this all the time, and ain't no time for no crying, ain't no time for no feelings, ain't no time for thinking about nothing about, you need to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you need to read about the art of war. Like, if that is how you are living, you're gonna be dead at 52, right? So understand, like, I don't like the idea of dismissing people because of what they do, because I'll say this: I would rather for my entertainers to be entertainers and entertain rather than jump into politics and jump into things that they don't have the range for. Because now this is why we're in the space where a lot of these stupid politicians go and get folks like a Charlemagne the God or some of these rappers and some of these singers to start speaking on politics when they don't have the range for any of it, because people think that entertainment is interchangeable with Black progress. That's why I say we have to kind of keep them in two separate entities. There is a time for us to put in the work, but there is also a time for what you call wellness and mindfulness. There is a time for you to make sure that internally you are healed. Think about when you go to work. If you got a job that you don't like, you don't spend your weekend doing more stuff that's going to stress you out. Your weekend might be, I'm going to relax, I'm going to take a nap. I'm sending the kids to grandma and grandpa's house so I can just have one quiet day. You know what I mean? I'm treating me and my wife. We're going to the nicest restaurant tonight. I'm going fishing, right? I'm going to go visit my good friend I haven't seen in 20 years. I'm just going to call all my relatives. I'm going to call all my favorite aunties and uncles and cousins, right? That's what that's about. And that way you have the energy and the peace of mind to go back to work to that BS. But if you're in a bunch of BS Monday through Friday every single day, and then your weekend is some more BS, because I don't know, you took all your work home from work to do over the weekend, and you doing this and you doing that and all this other stuff, and you stressing out, and you're on go all the time, you never have a moment to just, what do you think's going to happen? This is when you start aging bad. This is when your body start falling apart. The knees start aching, start getting all these complications. You always got to get a procedure every 2 years. So I think some folks have gotten to a space where their ego is so inflated that they can't even be real for a minute. Because understand, a lot of these folks that are saying the same nonsense about, no, we need to focus on this, we need to focus on that. They be in the same movie theaters eating the same popcorn with the rest of us. So I really don't want to hear it. So yeah, anyway, DJ Vlad, he can be quiet, but just recognize that what Taraji is doing is she's painting the picture of what we've seen happen. And I'm just going to keep letting these topics continue to jump right into the next one, because what Taraji is painting is the fact that the goalpost continues to move, right? Especially when it comes to Black film, when it comes to Black Hollywood, when it comes even with music, but I'm going to stick with film. Going back to American Fiction, which was that movie that I just sized up a minute ago, right? Great film. Let's just talk numbers, right? Now, I was looking at Box Office Mojo. So their box office numbers from last weekend. Recognize that last weekend, American Fiction had the highest rate of revenue per screen in the country. The highest, $8,654 per screen. Now, here's where the numbers get real off the Richter and you're like, what the hell? This movie only debuted at number 15. Why? Because it was only in 114 theaters, right? The average movie normally opens in about 3,000 theaters nationwide. This one was only open in 114. Now, mind you, this was not their first week. This is like week number 2, because I saw this movie, I want to say around Christmas, right? And so, you know, $8,654. That's a really astronomically high number for a per screen profit. Normally, that ranges normally between about $2,500 to about $4,200 per screen. That's what it normally is. All right. And so what was the number 1 movie at the same time? Night Swim. Now, Night Swim was opened in 3,256 screens compared to American Fiction's 114. Now, we said American Fiction had $8,654 when it comes to revenue per screen. Night Swim had $3,629, right? Night Swim was the next in line as far as revenue per screen. And everything else in the top 15 was way below that. So recognize you're kind of seeing that game. Then we jump into this past weekend, all right? Now, American Fiction bumped up to number 12 because they added it to some more screens. It's now in 625 screens. Now, I will say the gross per theater has dropped down to $36.78, which is still higher than Night Swim from the week before, right? But understand, what was number 1 and number 2 in the country this week? Mean Girls and The Beekeeper, 2 movies that both opened in over 3,000 screens, right? And so, again, you have these movies where they're set up to fail because they're not even given the same screens. And now, at this point, the promotional campaign for American Fiction is over. They're just going to ride the wave of the award season, and hopefully word of mouth will help that movie to climb. That movie has only made about $5 million at the box office, right? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they just weren't opened in enough screens. Now, I know a lot of y'all be giving Tyler Perry a bunch of smoke, but this is one of the things that he also used to call out all the time when distributing through Lionsgate, where a lot of times they would not open his films in 3,000 theaters. He had to always fight and claw. A lot of times he might get 1,900 screens. On a good day, he might get 2,000. And it was because they felt, hey, this is not bankable enough. White people aren't going to come see this. It's only going to be for you and your folks. And so just understand that, like, that's where we're at. And it goes back to the conversation I had on the Monique versus Steve Harvey video. I'm not going to go back and rehash what was talked about on there, but there's a video where I talk about that. And I talk about the conversation of distribution and what happens in Black Hollywood and why we've run into a lot of the things that we run into. So you guys can just kind of check that video and reference that. I'm going to pause, and then we're going to jump back into a few other topics here. Because I can't wait to get to Vivek. All right. I also apologize for talking so fast. I just want to get through all these topics because I have so many. Okay. Let's see. Oh, y'all are going in on Friends. Okay. Yeah, Friends, I've seen some episodes. It was okay. It's a different kind of humor. Like, y'all gonna fight me, but I'm gonna say, when it came to like white sitcoms that actually made me laugh, Roseanne was one of my favorites. That's why I was so disappointed that she became what she became. But Roseanne, that was a very excellent sitcom back in the day. I'm talking about the original run from, I think, 80. I don't remember when it came out. I want to say 88 to 97 or something like that. It just did such a great job of showing the parallels between like working class white Americans and where a lot of other people sit. It was just so well written. So I hate that she became what she became. I'm like, dang, man. But that was a really great show. Malcolm in the Middle is probably one of my favorite sitcoms, period. Simpsons season 1 through 8, one of my favorites. King of the Hill, one of my favorites. Friends, just, it never did it for me. I'd even go for Seinfeld before I go for Friends. All right. You know, they had a moment here or there. It was overrated. All right. Somebody said, you're still chiseled, Cal. I mean, I still got a little chisel here, but my face is filled out a little bit. I'm starting to put on my grown man weight, so my face is starting to get a little round. Like, oh, I miss having them cheap, chiseled model looking face, but it's okay. Do what I gotta do. Let's see. Charlene said Warner Brothers was treating these women like they were on the Chitlin circuit. No food, no trailers. Oh yeah, with Color Purple, same thing. Where you saw they weren't getting transportation to the venue. They had to drive on their own, and they didn't have their own trailers. All kind of nonsense. And this is a movie I think that had like $100 million budget, or maybe if it wasn't 100, it might have been 60 million. But either way, anything over 50 million is, in my opinion, big budget. Hey, Bibi said Angela Bassett told us 12 years ago they do not want to play or pay black actors and will force them from movies to TV. She was right. All right. Oh, this is good, Tanika, Shantae. They have black actors doing their own hair and makeup because they won't employ artists that know how to color match or melanated skin or work with textured hair. I remember watching Regina Hall's speech with Essence, which, by the way, that's a funny speech. It's so funny because she speaks for like 17 minutes. I don't know if she was drunk or what, but that thing had me dying. But anyway, she talks about how her agent fought to ensure that hair was included in the contract. Because, yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff going on with that. Where, again, yeah, you got to do your own stuff, right? Or how many times have we seen something like the Today Show or Good Morning America, and they got, I don't know, they got the woman over there talking about hair tips and stuff, and then there's the white woman that does something to the black lady's hair, and the black lady look all crazy because she didn't know what she was doing, and then she's sitting there smiling like, this looks great, huh? And they're like, oh, it's just amazing. I'm like, y'all up here lying. The woman look crazy, right? You have that. Let me see here. Sydney Bullock said Wanda is hilarious. She's never had a lot of luck in Hollywood, in my opinion, because she's had 3 shows on Fox and all of them kept getting canceled. I remember she had Wanda at Large. She had another show where it was like she went and did different things, because one of the episodes, I remember she was on a plane and she was pissed because it was turbulent. So she was going to get her license to be a pilot and she got too scared. She's like, I ain't trying to die. I changed my mind. That got canceled. And she had one other show, but I can't remember what it was. Let's see. Yeah, I don't deal with Vlad TV. Vlad, and it pisses me off because they be having everybody on there, and that's when they give the good interviews, all the in-depth. Listen, I'm going to shout out a few platforms that I think do really great with interviews. There's a podcast I love. This is specifically for music. Who I enjoy this podcast because it's so good. This is for like R&B heads. The We Sound Crazy podcast, I think, is such a great one. That's one specifically where they interview mainly entertainers in music, right? So I haven't seen the one that they did with Tweet, but it's really cool to finally see people like that understand music and know music, because from what I understand, everybody on the panel has some kind of connection to the music industry, so they can speak the language of the music. They can have real conversations with the artist about, how did you record? I heard you recorded this song in minor but sang everything in major. How did you do it and make it sound in key? Like that kind of stuff. So that's a really, really great one. I already told y'all I like Terrell has a great one too. All of mine are with the singing. Terrell has a dope one, right? I like this is not really interviews, but it's more so, well, they do interviews sometimes as well. Black Music Archive is a great one if you really like to see notes on like the study of voice. He's doing a great job with what he's doing. So there's people who have great platforms that are more so about like positivity and not just tearing folks down. So those are the ones I really like to get behind. Anyway. Oh, what up, Lorinda? Hey, shout out to you. Lorinda is one of the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful actresses that is in my short film Pullover So I Can Hit You. I cannot wait to share that. It is so funny. It came out so good, guys. I am excited about it. It was, if you follow me, about a year ago, I told you guys I was working on a project, and that project was specifically, we were taking one of the podcast episodes and turning it into a short film, and we did that. We shot in LA, and it came out so good. So good. I can't wait for us to do the rollout with that. So yeah, shout out to you, Lorinda. And she was a lifesaver, because when I tell you we had a situation where our lead actress unfortunately got RSV. Like, I was landing in LA. It was 11, maybe 10:30 p.m. at night. I just got off we just landed, and the light comes on, ding, and people are taking off the seatbelts, and I get the text, and it's like, our actress, she can't do it. She pulled out. Lorinda was able to come in, because we were shooting at, I think call time was 8 a.m., right? I mean, I don't even think 10 hours. Lorinda, thank God, I found her and reached out, and she was able to learn all her parts and be on set, costume, everything. Like, it helped keep everything going, because I was about to just, when I found out our lead, the lady that's technically playing my mother, couldn't do it. The way I was about to just sit back down on the plane, like, we can just go on back to DC. I'm over it already. So yeah, shout out to you, Lorinda. All right. And she does everything too. So check her out. She sings, she dances. She was on That's So Raven. She's been on all these different TV shows. So she's great. All right. Let's see here. Tamara said, we're talking about the drama around The Color Purple. We ain't even talk about the actual movie. Yeah. Oh, I did get to see that too. I liked it. I liked it. I think that what made me like this version is it's not as centered on the trauma. They still cover the heavy bits, but it's a bit more whimsical. I will say it does come off a little rushed, just because I know it's based off of the Broadway play and not the movie. I haven't seen the Broadway play, so the only thing I could measure it up against was the movie. If I had one thing I wish they would have kept, it would have been the church scene where they're doing the God is trying to tell you something. I just always felt like that was a pivotal scene. But I think also maybe it was like, we don't want to touch it because nothing's going to touch that original scene. It's just a great scene with the singing and all that. But I thought it was a great watch. I thought Taraji did excellent. I thought Daniel Brooks was excellent. Fantasia did great. Like, everybody, it was great. I love to see, Fatima Robinson was one of the choreographers. Ricky Dillard, I think, was one of the people. Ricky Dillard was one of the people that was in charge of music. It was great. I love that there was thought put behind the project. So yeah, it was a nice watch. I took my godmom to see it because she wanted to see. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna keep going because I have so much more to still cover. Yes, y'all, give Lorinda her flowers. Exactly. Oh, Comedy Hype. I like them too. Thank you, Jessica J. I really enjoy Comedy Hype. They're really good at putting context behind a lot of stories, especially with like Black comedians, Black actors. That's a really great one as well. I like all of the people that do their reporting. Okay. Somebody said, what the heck is an honorary Oscar? Oh, that's about Angela. That's jacked up. Yeah, like, y'all stop playing in Angela's face. That's cool. Y'all gave her a participation Oscar, but y'all could have definitely just done right by her in '93 when you should have, right? Okay, we got to keep going, guys. I'm sorry, I have too much to cover, and I want to. It's already 10:43. Okay, now one of the things that I said in my Nikki video, where I talk about how a lot of times we're going back to politics, y'all. I'm sorry, we got to get back in the trenches here. A lot of times you have people who will erase their identity and align with white nationalism if it means that they can climb the ranks. And so Nikki Haley's been getting smoke for me. Vivek has been getting smoke for me. And so as I've been looking at the numbers from Iowa, I said, Vivek, everything that I just said has come into fruition. And the point that I want to get is this. So let me go to my phone real quick because there's two parts. First, I want to read. This was coming out of what you call like an exit. They did some kind of like group study or some kind of group think about just, voters and where people stood. And so when it came to Vivek, he was running into issues because a lot of folks really didn't know what to do with him. Vivek, where are you at? Let me get this right. Where's the part I had? I almost wanted to laugh. All right. So now, mind you, Vivek has went to all 99 counties in Iowa. He has spent $10 million in Iowa specifically because he just knew that he was going to win this state, right? Now, his wife, this is when they were still doing like the group think and the focus groups, right? So his wife had asked voters what they were hearing about why they were not supporting Vivek, right? Dang it. I want to find the actual article I want to read. I'm going to go to that. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Yes, this is what I want. All right. So Ramaswamy, his wife, had a simple ask for two supporters of her husband's presidential campaign. What do people say about why they're not supporting Vivek Ramaswamy? And what answers can I help you provide? Well, the only one I have and couldn't even remember who said it to me, but they mentioned his dark skin and they think he's Muslim. A supporter named Teresa Fowler told her at a restaurant meet and greet Thursday. I kind of set them straight on that. I don't know if they believe me or think I was covering for him. I don't know. Ramaswamy, a physician, faced throughout the day. I'm sorry, that's the wife we're talking about. The wife is the physician. Faced throughout the day as she held events in the final push by the Ramaswamy campaign to meet prospective caucus goers in the last days leading up to the Iowa caucuses. The questions made clear that despite holding nearly 300 events in the state, more than any other presidential campaign, a number of Iowa Republicans still have questions about the Ramaswamy's faith, nationality, and race, though he has addressed all of those factors of his personal life repeatedly during the campaign. Nikki Haley, who is also Indian American, has also faced similar questions during the 2024 race. In an interview after the event, Fowler expanded on the concerns she hears from members of her own family regarding Ramaswamy. They think he's Muslim, so it's his nationality more than anything, she said. It's just that they can't get beyond when you look at someone and you know, I'm working on them, Fowler said. At a later event in Jefferson County, Iowa, Mrs. Ramaswamy was grilled by one of two event attendees about her own upbringing. Now we got smoke for the wife. You know, how long have you been in the United States? Were you born here? Asked Wayne Keener. What is his name here? Keeskern. I don't know if this K is silent or not, but we're going to find out later on. An attendee in Fairfield, Iowa. No, I came here when I was 4. Vivek was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ms. Ramaswamy replied, explaining her family's Indian heritage. The attendee continued with questions about Ms. Ramaswamy's parents, where they lived and whether they had green cards. Are they citizens? Before remarking that she doesn't have an accent. I've been here since I was 4 years old, Ms. Ramaswamy replied. I've spoken English since I was 4. In an interview after the event, Keeskern, whatever his name is, I'm going to call it KK, explained that he loves foreign people, citing what he described as his 2 unofficially adopted children. He said he asked about Ms. Ramaswamy's upbringing because of the bad things the Ramaswamys say about the state of the country. He has not yet decided who he will support at the caucus, but it will not be Ramaswamy. He particularly states and takes issue with Vivek Ramaswamy's 10 Truths platform and calls for revolution, which he interprets as a candidate revolting against the country you love. I keep thinking, why did you come here then if it's so bad? Keeskern said, this guy's going to turn out to be a dictator, I'm afraid, just like Donald Trump's going to be. At multiple events, Ms. Ramaswamy found herself outlining her religious views to voters, inquiring about her stance on religion and faith. So again, remember how I said, you can sit here and be a mouthpiece for white supremacy and play the game, but eventually there's not a glass ceiling for you. There is a cement ceiling because they're going to put the big stop there where, all right, you've gotten to as far as you're going to get. You've done what it is that we enjoy. But at the end of the day, we're always going to go back to our own, which is what white America is doing to Vivek Ramaswamy. He does not even stand a chance. And so now that we get to that, think of this. This man has said every white nationalist talking point that you can think of, right? And he right now I haven't seen the numbers in the last 2 hours, but before I got on the live, he had less than 8% of the vote, right? I think Trump was at like 52. DeSantis might have been at 18 or 19, and Nikki was at 18 or 19, and Ramaswamy was in a far distant 4th, right? And this is where it gets even funnier, because again, who are the ones in the bottom 2 right now? Nikki, Ramaswamy. Trump didn't even campaign in Iowa. Barely. Trump is trying to take care of all of his cuckoo shenanigans stuff he got going with the court cases and everything. And DeSantis, I don't even know what his platform is. He has had a horrible platform since day one. Like I said, all he has is wokey woke, 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 wokey woke, woke, woke. That's all he talks about. And still, even DeSantis outpolled and outperformed Nikki. Now, this might be different by the time I turn this thing off and go look. But right now, DeSantis is still number 2. But again, Ramaswamy, if I put Ramaswamy and DeSantis in a room together, they both pretty much say exactly the same thing. Ramaswamy, why do you think you were not selected? Be for real. So just recognize a lot of times when y'all sit here and play these stupid games and try to think that you've outsmarted everything, because like I said, to me, Vivek ran as a person with no identity. He erased everything about him being, an Indian American and latched on to white talking points. And then he'd go rap Eminem songs, which I thought was funny. And then Eminem gave a cease and desist and said, don't you ever perform my ish again. Right? So he ran on this whole, everything is a conspiracy. Everything is this. The system is out to get you. And then not only that, you did it at the expense of other people. Like you went and you were going, like he was somebody who was fine with gutting affirmative action. He was somebody who said, yeah, DEI got to go. All of these different things got to go. He ran as a middle-aged conservative white man and was reminded that he is a younger Indian American. And they made an example out of him. So he spent all his money in Iowa and lost. There's no momentum. I'm sure he'll be dropping out of the campaign soon enough because the money is not coming in at the same rate. And I just think back to him trying to tell me, or not me, but trying to tell Don Lemon what was offensive to African Americans in regards to race. Look at that. Then it gets even funnier because now his political director that was a part of his New Hampshire team, Brian Swanson, has now jumped ship and moved to the Donald Trump team, right? So the very person you were trying to emulate and align with and, you know, thinking you were going to get in the door if you just do exactly what he does and you don't call him out on his nonsense and you just play the game and you say enough of the right talking points, you'll get in the door. How did that work out for you, right? Understand that you are temporary relief until they get what they want. And then understand you were the opening act for the opening act, okay? Because the show in Iowa is still Donald Trump, right? Y'all know I can't stand Orange Man, but I'm not blind to how this is operating. White America's going to put Trump right back in there if they can. They've already told you that, right? So again, recognize you were not even the showstopper. You are the opening act to the opening act. Think about like when you go to that concert and they got 10 people on the bill. You know, sometimes there's certain entertainers that can't set. Well, no, I'm gonna rephrase. Rewind. Think about when you got that big name entertainer, sold out tour in every city. I mean, multiple nights in the same city. And they're nice enough to bring on 3 or 4 people to also be opening acts. You know, in the order that you go, the acts get bigger, right? And so that very, very first act, they come in there. I mean, the arena, they just open the doors, right? They're already performing while the people are still scanning the tickets to get in. People are getting popcorn, hot dogs, buying drinks. Folks are on the phone trying to, I'm in section 102, seat, you know, all of that and everything. So nobody's paying attention to who was on the stage. They're over here doing all this. And normally that opening act to the opening act of the opening act of the opening act doesn't even have full access to the stage. They don't get to use the pyrotechnics. They don't get to use the LED lights. They don't even get a band. A lot of times they barely get a DJ. It's just somebody playing the instrumentals. They don't got the same sound system. They almost got a karaoke mic up there. The sound is what up, and everything. That's Vivek Ramaswamy in this election. But he has convinced himself that he is on par with the headliner of the show. Because understand, when the headliner comes out, the lights go down, everybody screams. The person that was in line trying to get that drink said, hell with this. They running back to get to their seat. All right, it's time to see the show, right? And the lights go down, the lasers go up, the water's coming down, the dancers are coming out the floor, the stage is moving, the screens are doing all this stuff. And nobody even remembers the name of that opening act of the opening act of the opening act of the opening act. That is Vivek Ramaswamy. So I am enjoying watching him get a taste of his own medicine. Because this, when I tell you, if there was somebody that had a punchable face, it was him. He's just on some nonsense. Like, this is stupid, right? And what's so interesting, he could have pulled in Black Republicans, all 8 of them, right? But instead, he chose to latch on to anti-Black talking points. And so he couldn't even pull them. Stupid. Make it make sense. All right. The stupidity, like just, and mind you, he's super rich, right? He has the resources to do what he wants, but again, America's gonna still remind you who you are. It's just understand, like no matter what background you come from, if you are not white in this country, right? Once you start climbing, people will find a way to remind you what it is you come from and remind you what the status quo is. And so sit there and play the silly game if you want to. I think back, unfortunately, to Diamond and Silk. They did all that stumping for Orange Man. The lady died. And Trump didn't even know the name of the friend. You know, he only knew which one. I don't even remember which. I think Diamond died. Silk is still around, right? He didn't even know Silk's name. Didn't even know her. I'm like, wait a minute. Now they done went out here and probably lost all their friends and everything else, stumping for you, running all around the country. You never gave them any money for the hair budget, so they had to wear the same 2 wigs since 2015, and then you don't even know these women's names. Like, make that make sense, right? You saw Herman Cain out here jumping into some nonsense, and yeah, the pandemic is some BS, and then went to the rally in Tulsa and died. Trump didn't even go to the funeral. Didn't even send out a tweet. Nothing. He just died. They just moved on, right? Y'all keep playing these stupid games if you want to. You're going to always find out every single time. Anyway, in lighter news, let me jump to Jasmine Crockett for 1 second, because this clip has had me dying all week. I'm just going to play the segment that made me laugh. Now, recognize, we know there's a whole lot going on. You have the situation with Hunter Biden. They want to hold him in contempt of court because he did not want to appear before their committee privately. He wanted to appear publicly. And they said, hell no, you got to do it behind closed doors. And so he said, the hell with that. And so now there's this whole thing. But as they were having this big hearing about the hoopla around Hunter Biden, it's funny too, because they always bring him up like as like kryptonite with these conversations. People sometimes will do that in my chat. I'm like, listen, I am not loyal to the Bidens at all. And if you think I care about Hunter, y'all can bring him up all you want, but that has nothing to do with my conversation on reparations, right? So anyway, bring him up all you want. That does nothing for me. But anyway, I want to go to this clip here. I'm just going to play a segment of it. Quick question. Can you hear this snap in the mic, or is it coming out of this? Because I don't know what my sound is playing through tonight. Is it coming through the mic? or is it coming through this? Somebody answer me. Let's see what you guys are saying. Is my mic hot or is it my MacBook? I'll just play from here. Okay, well, y'all. Okay, so it is the mic. Wonderful. All right, let me go to this clip really quick. Let's see. Let me fast forward. This part had me rolling, and this is gonna lead somewhere. I promise. All right.
Y'all are still standing right now because you should be quite dizzy from all the spinning that you're constantly doing when it comes to spinning the truth. You talk about free and fair elections, but you back a guy who we know tried to steal the election. And this isn't about what Democrats have to say. Let me remind you, for those of you that don't know how the justice system works, it's not a matter of the president went in and indicted Trump, but we are talking about grand juries. Grand juries are comprised of American citizens, and the people that have entered pleas of guilty that will be flipping on your leader in a minute, they are Republicans. I do want to point that out. And half of them were Republicans that were handpicked by Donald Trump himself. So, to be clear,
right here,
whatever happens to your little leader, it's going to be because of the actions that he took. So you can talk all you want to about how January 6th was nonsense, but all of y'all were running at that time. Y'all were grabbing y'all's gas masks and y'all were running to your offices because you didn't know if they were coming to kill you. You should have cared that somebody was there to protect you, but instead you want to play games because you found out that it was your leader that decided that he wanted to propagate an insurrection on our country. So don't tell me that you care about the Constitution, because you don't. All you care about is Trump getting reelected. I'll yield the last of my time to my leader.
Listen, if there was ever a moment where I was like, damn, maybe I should get into politics, because if I can drag everybody in Congress like that, like, man, like I was like, yeah, maybe I might have to run for office, because I would love to just drag everybody in Congress like that. I said, I know that's right. But let me get to my point, because I enjoyed every minute of that. But what was so funny is a lot of people could not combat or refute anything that she said. So what do you think was the next step that everybody jumped into? Here come the insults. So they tried to paint this thing of, oh, she is illiterate and she is, they've called this woman all kinds of names because she has a Southern accent. Now all of a sudden a Southern accent means that you're illiterate. I said, the way that y'all move the goalposts, because I want to say something too, right? One of the things that, and I've been frying up Republicans all day, but so be it. So what's interesting is one of the things that I've noticed happened with the GOP once Orange Man got in there, because he went in there and shook up everything and they can't operate as business as usual anymore. A lot of the candidates are now trying to rebrand their image to come off as, I'm one of you too, in order to really have a shot at possibly ever holding office again. Because at this point, if you don't mirror Orange Man, you don't have a shot. And so, like, Ted Cruz is a perfect one. I saw some clip of him. I think this is when everybody was beefing with Bud Light or whatever, because they aligned with somebody that conservatives were pissed about. And it's like Ted Cruz, I forgot what he did, but he randomly had this magical Southern accent that came out of nowhere, right? And so you have like that happening. Is why don't you come try and take my gun from me? I'll try to show you blah 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 blah. I'm like, y'all are weird as hell, right? And so now you have all these politicians who are trying to like literally become something they're not to have a shot. And now all of a sudden the idea of a Southern accent is illiterate. I'm like, y'all always do the same thing. When you don't have the range, they always try to throw insults or do whatever else they did. Yes, Jose, we saw that Trump won Iowa. Thank you for sharing. Anyway, with that being said, and I imagine that y'all stood in -9-degree weather to make sure that man won Iowa. Woo, the racism is strong. They said, we're going to stand in this cold. Like, I know half of them got hypothermia standing out there in them long lines. Anyway, and so, yeah, they will always break their neck to sit here and, like, challenge and try to, like, throw the insults out there, right? Even like when I did the Whoopi video and we were talking about all the conversations around economics and how things have changed generationally, and how, inflation has skyrocketed 644% since 1979, and the cost of housing is skyrocketed, and daycare and all these different things. And the people that could not refute my numbers, what did they do? Well, when's the last time you had a job? And I'm like, sometimes I wish y'all would Google me, because like, don't play, ask about me, okay? And so it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like, again, people are going to throw the insults and everything when they don't have the range. And that's because a lot of times when we talk about status quo and people that protect it, they don't like to get challenged, right? And like I said earlier, whiteness allows for BS to, take place and continue if it protects the status quo. And that status quo, again, is maintaining and upholding whiteness. Upholding nationalism, white supremacy, so on and so forth. It's always been that way. So yeah, they have tried to call Jasmine every name in the book. Jasmine, listen, stand 10 toes down, Jasmine. I don't know all of her policy. I haven't followed her like that, but I was tickled by that clip. I'm like, finally somebody says it. But the worst part is, even when these folks get called out with their nonsense, they don't care because they have enough people who will back and allow the same nonsense to continue. So, we'll just see how things unfold. I'm going to pause and read some comments. Because God, I still got so much. We're not gonna get through everything tonight, but maybe we might have to do. I'm gonna break some of these up into individual videos that won't be in a live just for the sake of time. Yeah, Jasmine had me dying when she said, because y'all was running scared, didn't know if they was coming to kill you. Say, Calvin, I need to hear your opinion on the Book of Clarence. I have not seen it yet, but I saw it's not doing that good at the box office, so maybe I'll go support it. But I haven't seen it yet. Course correction said Hunter made them look like fools. Tanika says she collects these clowns at every opportunity. Yeah, you know when somebody is dragging you bad when they get in their pocket and they don't even stutter and they start talking faster. Like if you see the clip, she turned her whole body. Was like, I know that's right. Y'all lucky I wasn't in Congress. I would have tagged me in. Tag me in. I got some stuff to say too. Your little leader. Too good. Somebody said, do you remember the black man that was so pro-Trump he had glasses? He garnered some fame on YouTube. I forgot his name. He got sick and passed away. Oh, I know. I know who you're talking about. I don't know his name. He used to wear a hat. That was when he was talking about racism wasn't bad. I like that kind of racism. Give me some more of it. Okay. He done went on to glory. Anyway, let's see. Where am I at here? Oh God, Marjorie Taylor Greene. What they say? Marjorie Taylor Greene has the most obnoxious. Thank you. I'm glad somebody said she has, and it's not. I'm not even talking about the accent. I'm just painting the picture that she too has a Southern accent. But you don't see those same groups that are going after Jasmine talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. They said Marjorie Taylor Greene has the most obnoxious Southern accent in there, but nobody clowns her for it. And mind you, I love an accent, so this is not me going and talking down on anybody with Southern accents. I love a good accent. I always tell y'all that, right? That's why the clip. You know the little boy that went viral about the corn, like that. When I tell you that was one of my favorite videos, it's like this little black kid that's like 6 or 7, and he's like, I can't think of a more beautiful thing than corn. Like that kid, I hope he's doing well. Like that was my favorite video last year. He was at some kind of event, and boy, he was so tickled about that corn. I was like, okay, what? But then corn, it could be a more beautiful thing. I said, all right, all right. I hope he is doing well. Okay. All right, shifting out of politics, we're going to music really quick. Then come on. Mos Def and Drake, because this was an interesting one. I don't normally spend a whole lot of time on rappers, but I'll talk about it tonight. So as we know, Mos Def had made some statements about Drake where he pretty much was saying like he doesn't really see Drake as hip hop, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that Drake has become very, very massive and commercial and so on and so forth. And it started this big dialogue about what do you classify Drake as? Is he hip hop or has he sold out, so on and so forth. And I think, again, it's a conversation. One, some of this conversation is generational. With each generation, the standard is always going to be set and be precedent. And when the next generation comes in, if things don't align and match that precedent, sometimes people are kind of dismissive. Side note, speaking of hip hop, I want to say, you guys, I know y'all be firing up Will Smith, but that podcast he has is excellent. That Class of 1988 was a great podcast. Check that out. It's him just talking about the origins of hip hop and just everything that happened in 1988, which was just a great year for hip hop. So he's talking about Slick Rick and the emergence of Salt and Pepper and what happened with JJ Fad and what happened with Eric B. and Rakim and things that were going on with Run DMC, what was happening with all these different rappers. It's such a great podcast. Definitely check that out when you get a chance. It's on Audible. I think it's on Spotify as well. And some of the episodes are on YouTube, but that's a great listen. Anyway, back to my point. And so I think the thing with Drake, because a lot of people kept saying, well, yeah, he's not hip hop because he's commercial, but I don't think that's necessarily the argument because there's other rappers that are commercial that don't get this smoke. Because like a Kendrick Lamar is very commercial at this point, right? Or NBA Youngboy or like Lil Baby, all of these rappers are commercial, but they're not kind of painted in that same picture as a Drake. And I think what it is Drake has figured out a formula where his formula is he's capturing mainly pretty much three audiences: hip hop, pop, which I'm gonna say is at this point 2/3 of his audience, and then even like that conversation of those who are in like dance club mixes, like that mix, and then some element of R&B. I'm gonna mix the R&B with the hip hop conversation, so it's like the hip hop R&B audience, but then a huge pop audience, and then a huge audience just specifically for the clubs. And because he's been able to do that and have these massive hits and everything, he has now gained access into a lot of space that many rappers don't get, right? And so I think for a lot of rappers like Mos Def, who are acclaimed, who, you know, they let their music simmer. They're not dropping a project and a mixtape and on 15 different features every 2 months. You know, you know, people like them, or like a Nas or somebody, you got to wait a few years for a project. If you follow Little Brother, which is one of my favorite rap groups, they're number 3 in my line of rap group. Well, no, they're number 1 in my line of rap groups. Little Brother, Tribe Called Quest, and Outkast. Those are my 3 rap groups, right? You know, you're not going to keep getting a Little Brother album every week, right? Shout out to y'all in North Carolina. So, you know, so when you compare that to somebody like a Drake, who has 141 singles and has been in 84 music videos, right? You know, at this point, I don't think people are really talking about Drake in the conversation or the context specifically of music, but they're more so talking about Drake as far as the business of the industry, right? He has a formula that they figured out, and it comes off sometimes as mechanical. And because he knows that, again, those pockets of an audience he has, like we said, he has the hip hop audience, he has this really massive pop audience, he has the clubs, right? And so even if he drops a mid album, because I'm not gonna lie, I feel his more recent albums have been kind of just there. They're not really anything to really scoff at or jump at, but he knows that even if he pisses off the hip hop heads, pop audiences are still going to eat it up, which is why every time he releases, he's still going to be number 1. He's still going to have these massive hits. Radio's still going to just give him unlimited airplay. He's automatically going to be on all the curated Spotify playlists and playlists for Apple Music and everything else like that. And he's in a space where, you know, pop will always be interested, even if hip hop does not approve. You know, he's in a space where he will always have a permanent big budget. And so he's in a capacity where he can do what he wants, right? And I think for hip hop artists, or like the diehards, or the ones who are really all about, let's talk about lyricism and acclaim and this, that, and third, you know, Drake is just in a space where, you know, it just doesn't work in the same space for him. Like, because when I talk about the machine, think about it. Like, Drake is somebody at this point where he will always have the best producers on his projects, no ifs, ands, or buts, because everybody's hungry for success. So if you can get that no-name producer who has a hot beat, they're gonna break their neck if they can get a placement on the Drake album, because they know it's going to get radio play. They know it's going to blow up. They know it's going to be a thing, as opposed to, you know, if, I don't know, Common decides he's going to drop another album. You know, that hungry for it producer, he might still try to do something for Common, but if he can get to Drake, hell yeah, we gonna lock into that. Like, that's kind of just the opportunity that's there. So it allows him, again, to just, Drake can do anything he wants to creatively. That's why we've seen him kind of jump into all these spaces. He jumps into house music, he jumps into singing, he goes a little bit more pop, then all of a sudden he goes back into hip hop. And so I think what pisses off a lot of folks is, while he does all that, he kind of still does the cosplay of the street image that he never really was a part of, right? Because again, then we talk about, you're brought up with a little bit of money, you were from Canada, you were on a TV show, and so when you keep trying to do the real hood aesthetic and you bout it, it's kind of, it's cheesy, but pop audiences eat it up, and then they make Drake the face of hip hop and latch him in to be the greatest thing ever. I just think multiple things can be true at once. I still consider Drake to be hip hop. I just think he has a machine behind him, and he's a lot more commercial than other rappers. There's always been rappers that are commercial. Jay-Z is commercial, right? Kanye is commercial. Kanye is another one who can kind of just do whatever he wants. Like, you have all these rappers that are commercial, but I think the reason Drake gets so much smoke again is because, to me, and I don't know how to word this properly, but I feel like Drake is somebody at this point who doesn't really have a solidified musical identity. His musical identity is the trend that's popular. And I think for that reason, this is why hip hop heads, they'll entertain Drake, but a lot of times they don't put him in their list of the greatest anything. You know, like I said, his musical identity is the current trend that's popular. There are other rappers who don't really chase or follow a trend. They do what they do. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's all it is about it, you know? And so it's an interesting conversation. Now, I will say, for the folks who are trying to drag Mos Def, like, oh, what's the last hit he had? Understand, in my opinion, when it comes to somebody like a Mos Def, you know, Miomi says, you know, his mission and his goal was never the same as somebody like Drake's, right? And, you know, it's just, it's a part of the industry. And the thing is, as the industry continues to evolve and music gets bigger, things are going to constantly change with how people are rolled out. You're always going to have people who are anomalies in the system. And so, yeah, Drake is an anomaly. Even when we talk R&B and we go back in the day, think about all of the unsung episodes on TV1 where you had all of these women in R&B who were really trying to get up and blow up. And a lot of times the label wouldn't push them, or the label would want them to mirror one of two people, Whitney Houston or Janet Jackson. There were so many unsung episodes where it was like, I went to the label and I said, I want more money for my project. And they said, if you're not going to do it like Janet, we're not funding it. If you're not going to do it like Whitney, we're not funding it. Because again, even like a Whitney and a Janet, these are two entertainers that had the best of both worlds in pop and R&B, which allowed them to cross over. So, you know, it's a conversation, in my opinion, more so about the structure of the industry, not necessarily what it is. Because when Drake wants to really go there and be that kind of rapper, it's there. Right? He can pull it out of the bag when he wants to, but a lot of times he'll do other things. And I also do think some of the conversation is the conversation of ghostwriting. Everybody knows he has a ghostwriter here and there. So then that kind of stirs up another conversation. So I think there's other people on YouTube that specify specifically in hip hop that would speak on this way better than I can, because I'm an R&B head. I like to sing along. Right. But it's a very, very interesting conversation. So I would love to see kind of your 2 cents on what you classify Drake as. I still consider him a rapper. I consider him hip hop, but I just kind of put him in this caliber of a hip hop artist that's more so for like specifically entertainment, making you dance, and whatever the current trend is. And then I have my rappers that I go to that are, you know, they're not really about what's on the radio. You have like a lot of the most acclaimed rappers never got radio play, never got, you know, those big crossover hits. One of the biggest things Nas used to catch smoke for was like, dang, man, we like your lyrics, but you be having the worst beats all the time. Right. Which is one of the reasons why when he dropped the album that had You Owe Me and Uchi Wally, a lot of hip hop heads were like, what are you doing? Because, you know, finally, here's these songs that have this radio appeal. And it's like, what are you doing, man? It sounds like you selling out now. You trying to cross over, even though he dropped like 2 albums around that time. But, you know, another conversation for another time. Let me take a break here. How did Madonna get in this? All right. Let's see. Oh, y'all said the Corn Kid is doing well. I love to hear that. Yeah, the last time I really was like paying heavy attention to Drake was probably about 2018. That's around that time I kind of slowed down. Robin C said FD Signifier did a great video about Drake. Okay. Oh, by the way, check that out too. I was on Dr. Kamani Norrington Sands channel last night. That was the panel discussion they had about like black men working in toxic work environments. So FD Signifier was on that. Professor Odie and I want to make sure I got Jamal's name right on here. Let me make sure I said it right. Just want to make sure I have the right person. Oh, I'm sorry, Lamar Martin. I don't know where I got Jamal from. I'm sorry, Lamar. Yeah, so I was on a panel with all of them, and it was an interesting conversation. So definitely check that out. The link to that video is in my community tab. All right. I like that, Robin C. The issue is Drake's bag is being popular, and that doesn't give you an identity. It just makes you rich. It kind of goes back to, again, that conversation of just, you know, being an artist around a trend. And there's a lot of artists who I feel they kind of just ride whatever trend is there. I prefer to get behind artists that set a trend. Now, I will say, I will give him a lot of credit for being one of the rappers that started really kick jumping melodic rap and singing, right? Because think about it, before about 2007, a lot of rappers weren't really doing singing because it was deemed as corny, because that's why y'all got Ja Rule up out of there around 03, 04. And once 50 Cent got bigger and he used to light them up about singing. And so by the time Mesmerize dropped with Ashanti, all of a sudden everybody was like, all right, Ja Rule's corny, he sings, that's lame. So rappers weren't singing, right? And then my first memory of Drake is 07 with Replacement Girl, him and Trey Songz. I don't think he's singing on that, but by the time we get to like about 2009, 2010, you starting to hear him do some more singing on the songs. Now you got Snoop singing Sexual Seduction on his songs, and now the rappers are singing a little bit more. But yeah, because you know, this is when you would just get the R&B singer to sing your hook. Now you have a lot of rappers who kind of they can carry a tune, they do it themselves. So interesting time we're in. So yeah. Oh, come on, DJ Highlander. Little Brother Goes Hard. That's one of my favorite groups, period. I really enjoyed their documentary as well, so check that out when you get a chance. It's actually on YouTube. You know, Little Brother, when I was in college, you know, they always say like college students just have that music head space they're in. I was Little Brothered out. I remember I saw them at the Black Cat in 2008. That was one of the funnest concerts I ever went to. Great show. Christine said, talk about starting from the bottom, please. I get that. 'Cause it would be like if on my next album, let's just say my next album was all rap and I'm rapping about shooting them up, killing them up, and cooking cocaine in the kitchen and cutting bricks. And y'all would be like, Calvin, we see you every week on YouTube talking about, you know, random sitcom episodes and how you know the routine to Michael Jackson, Remember the Time. Are you serious? Be for real, right? You know, we know that you work with kids at one point. We know good and well you ain't selling nothing. That's it kind of comes from that. This kid was rich growing up. Like, all right. And I do think hip hop is layered. The idea of a one size fits all to fall into the category of hip hop, I think we should look at hip hop as a spectrum. There's all these different spaces, right? You have your conscious rappers, you have your more commercial rappers, you have what's happening down south, you have what's happening in all the different regions. You have your rappers who really are just good time rappers. They're not going to rap about anything, it's just going to be a good time. So they're in their bubble. You have your rappers who are all about political movements and uprisings and black collective this and black pro, blacker black, everything. You like, there's all these different buckets that it falls under. So I think the idea of maybe, you know, Drake doesn't fit in this pocket, but he fits in this one in the same way that another rapper fits in this one, but a different one fits there. That's how I look at it. All right. What up, Erica J? Great show. Mos Def sang hooks on his albums as well. Yeah, he did. He did. But I think what people are saying with the singing is, you know, Drake has a lot of songs where he just sings through the whole song too. I think that's one. And then even with sometimes where even if he was a feature, there's some songs where he's the one singing the hook. So I think that's kind of the conversation people were bringing up with like the singing. Okay. Lord, this is a long live. Lil Nas X. All y'all ain't gonna agree with me, but that's okay. So what's interesting with Lil Nas X, and I've said this before, I don't know why everybody gets offended at this kid, because at this point, he's kind of created a brand and you know what you're going to get. So anytime that I see he has some kind of project, I'm like, okay, let me see what he's going to do to shake the table today. So anything he does doesn't really bother me or offend me because I already know what's on the table, right? That's kind of the brand that he's created. But what's very interesting is kind of like, because what's happening is he's come out with a single. I haven't even seen the full video, but he's come out with a single and it's him. He's carrying a cross. And so everybody's saying, oh, no, this is disrespectful to Jesus and everything. And this is where I draw the line. So people who, in my opinion, some of the folks who've been just the worst people in society, all of a sudden have become super religious and holier than thou. And they know the Lord now, all of a sudden. I'm just like, a lot of y'all are silent on so much. You are silent on everything in regard to music that's all about shooting and killing up black folks all day. Music that's about selling drugs and this, that, and the third, and sexually assaulting women, and all the women are just bras and hoes, and if they ain't got a BBL, we not gonna F them and all this other stuff. And y'all are silent on all of that. You're silent when folks be doing all kind of stuff in the community that they should not be doing at the expense of our women and our children and even some of our men. Everybody's silent on all of that. But then all of a sudden when Jesus comes in the conversation, this is when y'all draw the line. And I'm like, I be at church and it be empty. So like, where y'all be at? I don't want to hear it. And so my thing is too, because I even saw somebody who spent so much time talking about black folks need to free themselves from Christianity. That's the white man's religion. And now they one of the main people. He went over the line. I said, y'all, I need y'all to figure out where we want to be in this, right? Because again, he's not the first one to do this. This is my thing. If I had anything that I had a gripe with, I just thought it was over and done with because we've seen it so many times. Like Madonna was sucking on crosses every week. Like at this point, when you've seen that for 30 years, I'm like, next in line, please. You know, Nas had the You Can Hate Me Now video with Diddy where they were on the cross. And then Diddy realized, wait, I don't like how this look. I look like I'm emulating Jesus. And then he done went and hit the person with the bottle at the office because they wouldn't stop playing the video, right? Lady Gaga does it all the time. They like people in entertainment have done so much sacrilegious stuff all the time. So this all of a sudden over performance and all of a sudden everybody's outraged. I really don't buy. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is a gay man and people already just have just smoke for gay people in general. And so they're using this and latching onto religion to really paint it as he's just done the absolute crazy offense. And meanwhile, I just saw this random clip of like an 11-year-old kid in a club talking about all the B words that he's getting and this. And I'm like, we need to realign our focus. Right? It's realign the focus. If Lil Nas X is not for you, he's not for you. Move on to the next. And people keep saying, well, what about the children? The children. I need y'all to stop using the children as a crutch for your nonsense and for your bigotry, to be honest, because y'all have selective memory of when you want to do this with the children. This is why I don't take Boozy seriously, because Boozy is the same person who bragged about getting a prostitute or a stripper or whatever to have sex with his, or to rape, his underage child. and then brag about it, talking about that was his passage into manhood. But now you want to sit here and talk about the lines that are drawn with this rapper that you don't listen to. Let it go. Some of y'all spend so much time on the wrong stuff. It's not that deep. If he's not for you, don't listen. Right? He's not really an entertainer. I'm not really into his music. He don't do much for me. Sorry, he's not for me. So I just kind of let him go into whatever space he's into. When he does what he does, I'm like, okay, all right, cool. I remember somebody got so mad one time. I think he did the BET Awards, and in the awards, remember he kissed another guy, and somebody was so mad that I didn't like do this video and rant about the emasculation of the black man. And I'm like, yo, you're killing me. It was a kiss. Next. Understand that when you're talking about a black collective, there are people that exist in many realms in our collective, and trying to always erase people's identity or their experience or their existence because you don't like it or you don't agree with it moves against the point of the purpose. In order for a collective to exist, the collective has to exist with multiple variations of people in that collective that are represented in order for that collective to flourish. When you leave people out of the conversation because you don't like them or you don't think that their experience or who they identify as aligns with how you see the world, you're in the way. At this point, you're fighting to have the same power that white men want in regard to oppressing others. So with that, I'm like, I'm not, it is what it is. So with Lil Nas X, I will say for him though, you have to stand in what it is you put out there. So if you put that out there and the smoke comes, you have to be ready for it. So once they start retreating and going back, I'm like, nah, stand in it. Don't start retreating now. Right? I'll say that about Madonna. I be cooking her, but you know what? Madonna stood 10 toes down in all of her nonsense. Every single time people got pissed off, she'd be like, and what? It ended up working for her in the long run because people started to recognize you can't break her with whatever it is that she has going. She's going to always do what she wants to do. So be it. Right? So once you lock in, you can't be like, oh, okay, maybe I did too much here. Like, I don't know what to say and all that. Just sometimes I think we're performative. So listen, if you're this outraged about Lil Nas X, okay. No, I would like that same energy for the things that actually affect us collectively. The things that actually affect us by policy, because some of these same ones that are fighting and going so hard against this rapper are the same ones endorsing a lot of people in politics that are putting out policy that is detrimental to the black collective, that is dangerous for our existence, that endangers our education, our housing, our healthcare, and they're silent on that. So Lil Nas X should be about number 506 on your list of complaints. Anyway, let's pause. All right. I would have never known the song was out if I didn't know there was controversy around it. Because honestly, the last song of his I remember, I mean, there was Old Town Road, that was a big one, but I don't really know his music. Like I kind of remember different videos he has because he always has some videos that go viral and people talk about it. But the songs I don't ever really remember. They don't really stick out to me like that. So yeah, it's like people really they pick and choose what they want to be offended at. Blissed Out said Target rap. I think that's about Drake. Fashawn Beauty said, you want to talk about a nasty song? Uchi Wally, sheesh. I heard the clean version first, right? Because you remember like Walmart, if you buy CDs at Walmart, they only had the clean versions. And so I remember I bought that Nas album. And so it's the clean version that's playing. I'm like, and then I think I was at somebody's house party. This had to be maybe middle school. Middle school, that's when you finally kind of get into your own because you're not in elementary anymore and y'all cuss like sailors and you say all of the worst and terrible things amongst your friends when the adults aren't around. And so we're at somebody's little party in the garage and they played that and I heard the real version. I said, whoa, this is a lot. Like, okay. Okay. Same thing when The Dream had I Love Your Girl. Like the version I heard a little So I was like, hey. And I remember I was at Howard. And we were at some maybe it was a step show. It might have been homecoming or something. But they started playing it, and then it was like, F. Then I was like, whoa, that's how it goes. And the whole crowd was singing it. I'm like, I'm so late to the party. I'll be late to everything. Always late. And I was pissed because I told you I'm bad with lyrics. So that was a song I could sing along to because all I had to do was I was like, oh, I can do that. What's that song? Put that on. So as soon as I heard the real version, I was like, oh, never mind. Okay. All right. So many other things in here to cover. We have so much, but I don't know if we're going to get through it all. I did want to spend a second. Actually, I'm going to spend more than a second on this one. This was actually kind of sad. We're going to kind of change the mood here a minute. The vice president of student affairs at Lincoln University, Dr. Antoinette Bonnie Candia-Bailey, who unfortunately died by suicide. due to the distress and bullying and severe mistreatment in her role. Let's see. I'm going to read the statement, which is actually really sad. All right, I'm going to read a statement that came from the university here. This is coming from Sherman Bonds, which is the education department president, I think. All right, unfortunately, I find myself with the need to inform you that it is my firm belief our beloved institution is heavy laden with despair, discontent, and disappointment regarding the loss of the precious life of Dr. Antoinette Candia-Bailey. Repeated calls and emails expressed a dire concern for the health of our university. Thus, I find myself standing in a state of hopelessness. Therefore, my appeal to you and the Board of Curators is to find a resolution that restores the consciousness of peace and healing. The university's institutional care has been breached. The present administration has become a liability to the mission and health of the institution. As the president of Lincoln University National Alumni Association, I have become compelled to demand a change in the office of the presidency of the university effective immediately. By the way, the president of the university is this white man. And I feel like the president of this universe is a white man too, while we at it. The Board of Curators has the fiduciary responsibility to ensure that there comes no harm to the institution's mission or brand. Today, I, along with many others, assert this appeal to you and the board. We, the community, family members, friends, and alumni, seek a path to healing. The most significant element of healing is a platform where we can all meet and release our anxieties for the good of our beloved alma mater. Your leadership in this endeavor requires resilience and strength. To care for others in a time of needs exalts all other measures for new beginnings when required. I pray I find you at your best. Your service requires your due diligence and my faith in him, who can do more than you can ask or imagine. Rest in my prayers that you and the board respond appropriately. It is time for a change in leadership. What occurs on one's watch is one's responsibility, and one must be held accountable, good or bad. With Godspeed and be blessed. And know the community, family members, friends, and alumni seek a path to healing. And so just to go a little bit deeper, Dr. Bailey at that time, and this is just coming from the publications I've been reading, they felt that she felt that she was unsupported, disregarded, and abused after attempts to address the bullying and the harassment by President Mosley of the university. Before her passing, she detailed the stigmatized bullying from the president and other leaders after disclosing her mental illness to the university. The university community is now rallying for accountability. All right. Now, the president of the university has volunteered to be on. How you listen to this? Has volunteered to be on. Volunteered to be placed on paid administrative leave. So he said, "I'm gonna take a vacation." But long story short, getting back to that. So with this university, with her again, she had revealed that she had battled mental illness, and from what was being told, a lot of people were weaponizing that against her and kind of putting her into a space where they kept deeming her as someone who wasn't able to perform. And anytime something did not go well, they would, attribute it to her. Well, she's technically not like one of us. Something's wrong with her, so on and so forth, to the point where she couldn't take it anymore. Now, again, everybody's experience is different. All right. And when we talk about people who make the choice to end their lives, and I've said this many, many times, because sometimes people say that's the most selfish thing you can do. And I've said this so many times, when it comes to people who make that choice, right? Understand that they are in a space where they are not themselves. They are not well. They are in a space where they feel that there is no way out. Nothing makes sense. You cannot bring them back into reality. And so a lot of times when people say, I'm pissed off that, my friend made this choice, or I'm pissed off that they did this, they're so selfish. You're pissed off because the friend that when they're well did something when they were unwell that doesn't align with how they respond when they're well. And so because of that, you're holding them to the standard of when they were well, as opposed to when they were battling whatever it was they were battling. And so understand, everybody handles things differently. Not everybody can handle every situation. And so I think when we get into a space where we start to become judgmental, that is a problem. And so for her, I hate that she didn't feel supported, especially and with this being an HBCU, it makes it even sadder. But I will say this too, in academia, the higher up you go, there's so much nonsense that exists, right? And one of the things, I've talked about this before, I've had 2 friends who have gone in higher academia and are now schizophrenic, right? One to the point where I can't even be in contact with them anymore because they are so far gone that, it's almost, you run a risk to your own livelihood by even having your name in their mouth, because you don't know what they're going to say and what they're going to put out there. And like, that is one of the most heartbreaking experiences, because that was one of like my closest friends ever, one of the best friends I made in college. And sadly, because they are just so far gone. Like they went to UCLA to do a PhD program, and just there were a few things that happened in their life. And then I remember they came to visit me, and they had a whole manic episode in my apartment. And mind you, I had no idea that they were even battling what they were battling. They didn't tell me, they didn't really disclose it yet. And like, they had a whole manic episode in my apartment. And it was kind of crazy because my mom was coming the next week, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to get them out? Because they, she had come to stay with me for like a week. And so, as time has progressed, it got to the point where, she didn't even really remember me, or sometimes she would, or sometimes she wouldn't. But when she would remember, like, long story short, anybody that they could think of from undergrad that they knew, they just had these crazy accusations about, like, crazy, right? And it's to the point where all of us who were close had to just pull back and love that person from a distance, love them from a distance, kind of check in with their family. How are they doing? But, the idea of just direct communication is no longer a thing. And until they are, I don't know if they can get better in the capacity that they're in, because they've been bad. They don't want to take the meds and everything. And so, this has been going on since about 2018. There are some conversations where it's like, you got to sometimes, as much as it hurts, you have to kind of learn how to repurpose your love that you have for somebody and have it in another form. So it's kind of sad. I kind of sometimes will kind of just check and check around just to make sure they're still alive, just to be sure. But understand, there's a lot of people in academia who go through a lot. It is one of the most grueling experiences the higher up you climb. And again, even when we look at like what's happened with the woman from Harvard that had stepped down, and how everybody harped, right? They couldn't wait to jump on her, right? Just the idea of people waiting for you to mess up. That's the narrative in higher academia, when you have these positions of power. And the fact that, again, she was vulnerable enough to say, and I'm speaking about the president, let me make sure I get this name right. I keep messing up her name. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I hate when I do that. I'm speaking specifically of, let's get the name right. Bonnie, Candia-Bailey, right? The fact that she was vulnerable enough to share, this is what I'm battling with. And people in her peer cohorts and everybody else and some of the higher ups mocked her with that and used that and weaponized that against her. And so just think about, like, and mind you, when you get to the space that she was in professionally, that is years and years of grinding, reading. You're up till 4 a.m, and then you show up to the office or do whatever by 6 or 7. And recognize people that are in PhD programs, they do a lot of stuff for free. They are broke. They ain't got no money. They got to grade papers. They have to lecture. They have to teach. They still got to do their dissertation. They still have to do their coursework. And so by the time they've made it through that nonsense of that program and all of the work that went into that, and understand, a lot of people in a PhD anywhere between 6, sometimes 7 years, sometimes even longer if the university will still keep funding it. Think of all the things that happen in people's life. So my friend that I was talking about, while she was going through her program, her dad died in the middle of all that. And so it's like there's all these different things that take place. And so when you finally get that accolade that you fought to get to, right? And you're finally there, now you're battling a mental health issue. And the very thing that you love is now being weaponized against you. The very thing that became your identity, the very thing that became what it is that made you get up every morning is now toxic, is now traumatic. It is now something that's a mockery of your existence, where you walk in a room and you don't know who really is in your corner and who's not. Where you walk in a room and you feel like you're in a space by yourself, but you're in an environment that is loving, because understand, HBCUs are supposed to be these wonderful, loving environments. But understand, there are flaws that exist everywhere, right? I'm telling you that as somebody who came out of Howard, I saw a whole lot of nonsense. But, so with that, when your whole sense of self has been compromised and you don't feel like yourself, this is how we get into these spaces where people start making these choices. So I just would hope that people get into a space where they don't judge the decisions of those who make that choice, because that's not an easy choice to make. That's a choice of saying, you know what, I'm done. And I know people have their religion or their faith, what they believe in, but a lot of times in the back of everybody's mind, nobody really knows what happens after this, right? You can have your faith, you can have what you believe in, but in the back of your mind, no matter how strong your faith is, there's a night or two where you question everything, right? And so the idea of making the choice to end it all and you don't even know what's next, that's a serious hurt. That is a serious space where I've done everything. I've talked to people, because even when they say, check on your strong friends, check on your friends, check-ins are fine. You can check in all the time. Sometimes it helps folks, but a lot of times people have already had their minds made up. I think back to even the Phyllis Hyman book that I read, that we did with the book club, and how when she finally chose to end it all, she had been planning this for years, right? And she got pissed because a few times folks would keep interrupting and stopping her and she couldn't do it. But she, she reached out to all of her close friends. She was supposed to be doing a concert at the Apollo with the Whispers that night. right? She had reached out to all her close friends. She wanted everybody to come to this show. It was going to be a special show and everything else like that. And from what I understand, she wasn't planning to take her life until after the concert, but she ended up doing it before the show. And so, she locked herself in the room and took the pills and went on. And, understand the hurt that has to exist. When you invite everybody you love that you were going to see one last time, you couldn't even bring yourself to see them one last time. You just said, let me do it now. Like, life is a lot for people. Like, I don't think people realize this. It is not easy to get up every day and deal with what we deal with. So every day that you're here just shows the resilience you have. And even for those who unfortunately made the choice to say, I'm tapped out, they deserve the rest that they wanted. And that's where I'm going to leave it at. Okay. Let us wind down. My chat is starting to freeze here. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. Spoke too soon. Just kidding. Let's see. I'm going to read a few comments and then it's already about to be midnight. I might be able to squeeze in one or two more. Oh no, I still have at least one serious story I need to cover. Okay, let me do my chat first. All right. Somebody said Madonna don't give a blank LOL. Seriously, look, she was just here not too long ago. I was almost going to get tickets, but again, with me funding a few projects, I had to really start being more physically responsible because I'm like, you spent so much money on concerts in 2023, and I was really going to go just to say that I've seen her because I really think this is going to be it for her. She's probably not doing any more shows because she had 2 nights in DC. But man, the folks that went, they were pissed. They're like, man, she didn't come on stage till like 11:30. I was like, 11:30. What time was the show? And like, yeah, the show was supposed to start at like 8. So I don't think she finished till about 1 something in the morning. I'd have been pissed. And I don't think I don't know if she had an opening act. So, but from what I understand, she's always done that. And I guess the diehard fans are like, you're supposed to just know that when you come. I'm like, yeah, but in DC, the subway shuts down at like midnight. So for people that don't drive, that means they would have had to leave the show early. Like, that sucks. Anyway. Let's see. Poison Ivy says, Sirius XM ruined my childhood. I'm just hearing the unedited versions of some songs. Yeah, and honestly, some of the songs actually sound better clean than the unedited version. Some of the songs I would have left the clean version, to be honest, but oh well. Did I put what's his name in my topics? I think I did. Let me see. I forgot. I'm gonna have to talk about him too. Did I? Let's see. Calvin Michaels. I got to search myself real quick. I'm just trying to see if I put him in here. Click this real quick. Just want to make sure he's whether they're in my title. Oh, I did put Katt Williams in here. Damn, I got to talk about Katt Williams too. Okay. Let me get through a few more comments. I'm gonna do Katt Williams first, then I'll go to the other story. Yeah, somebody said it hurt my heart that she felt she had to unalive herself. Beauty Ivy Beyond the Wall now. I hate that her life ended the way it did. It's just sad. Like, you just never know what people deal with. And that president got to go, right? Because from what I understand, the complaints made it up to the president. He just didn't do nothing about it, right? And Dr. Bailey, thank you, Kira, for saying that. Dr. Bailey documented everything, right? And I think with that, again, remember when we were talking about the idea of even when you're doing things and you're thinking the long term. I don't live in her head, but I guarantee you with her documenting everything, that's painting a bigger picture about an issue that exists that's bigger than just her, that a lot of people in the workplace are dealing with, especially in that specific field. And when we're talking about Black women in higher education in these spaces, just talking about what a lot of them deal with. Same thing with Black men dealing with what they deal with in some spaces. Her documenting that and the lack of response, again, she's just giving a voice to other people who are dealing with exactly the same thing. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but just see how things align and work. You know what I mean? Thank you, DJ. 7 to 10 years for a PhD program. Like, that's so much time. I've always wanted to go back and get a doctorate, but I changed my mind. I don't got 7 to 10 years. Like, I don't. Not right now because I'm in my creative bubble. So maybe when all the creativity slows down, sure. But not right now. I just got too much going on. My attention span's too short. Sydney said, I'm 26. At 23, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. One of the effects, unfortunately, can be SI. I have family members who taunt and mock me and wonder why I don't like talking to them. And I'm sorry, that's your experience. Okay, what SI stands for? Suicide. ideation. Thank you for clarifying that because I didn't know what SI was. Thank you for sharing that. But yeah, so many people deal with so much, right? Okay, shifting gears. I hate that we're going from this to Katt Williams. This is such a contrast, like the juxtaposition of this channel, I swear. Okay, so Katt Williams. Now I didn't get a chance to really jump into all of that because it's old news at this point. I will say that was a very interesting interview. I sat and watched all 2 hours of it. Now I see what y'all mean when y'all be saying my lives be 5 days long. I was like, Lord, but it was so entertaining and I just couldn't stop watching. So, yeah, a lot going on here, a whole lot. I don't even know where I would jump in at, but I do think, I'll say this. I believe about 70% of what he said. The other 30, I'm kind of on the fence with some of the stuff. Some of the things I was like, all right, I'm not trying to even sound like a hater. I think the bit where he said, what did he read, 3,000 books a year? I was like, that's a lot. That's like you reading 8, 9, 10 books a day. And I just don't know where you would have the time. And I was like, well, are these like chapter books or are these like, I don't know. And I'm not even knocking him because at least he's reading, right? But let me just say, he is somebody I would not want to piss off, right? You know, when somebody has nothing to lose, right? Those are the worst people when it comes to getting on their bad side because they have nothing to lose. And I mean, when he went down the line, I was like, my God, I felt bad for every person he brought up. I was like, God, crazy. And the thing with Katt Williams is he's quick on his feet. Like I always think back of the clip of him and Wanda Smith going at it. Like when I say that the two of them were going at it and he just was dropping, drop, like just didn't stop. I was like, yeah, I don't want to piss him off. There's some people I would not piss off. Entertaining. He is somebody who I think actually is like super. I think he's in the spectrum of intelligence that a lot of us are not in, which is why he does what he does. And it's all in kind of this whirlwind that you can't really categorize. So I do think, yeah, with a lot of what he was talking about, especially like him being like a child genius, I believe all of that. I do think though, because I will say a lot of times the funniest people are always the smartest people. Because here's the thing with comedy, you know, comedy is about how you can take everyday experiences and make them hilarious. Comedy is how you can reintroduce information that is commonly understood and make it hilarious. And you're really good at comedy if you can do it without profanity. If you can make people laugh with, hold on, I'm sorry. I get to telework tomorrow. Thank you, Snow. Okay. So with that being said, if you could, like, Sinbad is one of my favorite comedians. He was my favorite as a kid, right? And Sinbad never used profanity. And his gift was that he could tell and paint a story that would be so funny that he didn't have to really drop all the F-bombs and the B's and this and that. He could do that. Now, and this is nothing against folks who use profanity in their comedy, because sometimes profanity is funny. I ain't gonna lie. Sometimes when you use the F word the right way, I'll be in there dying, right? Every time I watch Set It Off, when they robbed that second bank, Balboa Savings and Loans, and Tishawn finally wasn't scary and decided she was going to rob the bank, but she just had to pretend to be one of the hostages at the bank, and she's doing that, please, oh, please. And then Vivica's like, would you shut up? Like, that scene I die at every time. It's so funny to me. So, yeah. But, you know, I think with Katt, there's a genius to how he does things. But I also do think some of that stuff was a stretch. But, yeah, he had some words for Steve Harvey. I hate that he had to go after Ricky Smiley. Ricky Smiley don't really be bothering nobody, so I ain't like that. But yeah, I mean, he was dragging a mess out of Steve Harvey. And I never really caught the correlation between Hanging with Mr. Cooper and the Steve Harvey Show. I never thought of that, because really, like, it really becomes generational. Because for me, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, I'm 5 or 6 years old. Like, I like the show because I remember In Vogue saying the theme song, and then they switched it, which I thought was so stupid. But because I remember Raven was on there. And the only episode I can remember is when the kid was being bullied, and then the mom showed up at the playground and was like, who's been messing with my baby? Like, I remember that episode. That's like the one episode I can remember. But I remember that being out around the same time as the Sinbad sitcom. Because I remember the son had a girl over one time when she wasn't supposed to be over. And I forgot what happened, but they spilled water or something, and the boy needed tissue. So the girl took the tissue out of her bra to help clean up the water. So I remember that. What do you want? All right. And like, it's 11:44. Go to bed. So, yeah. So with Katt, that's a lot. I just wouldn't want to be on his bad side. And the thing is, it's interesting because then so many people came out and responded. And I think sometimes if you really ain't did nothing wrong, you don't got to respond to the nonsense, right? So there's a lot of folks who I think jumped in. Michael Blackson was the anomaly for me when he considered himself to be one of the top 5 comedians out there. I said, now let's not start stretching at all. Let's not stretch. That was entertaining to me. But yeah, we'll see how this unfolds. I mean, yeah, I guess in the same way that there's beef in hip hop and beef in entertainment, there's beef in comedy, right? Man, I mean, he just dragged everybody. He started talking about kings of comedy, everything. I was like, Lord. All right, let's see what we got to say here. And like Shannon Sharp didn't even have to say much. I feel like they just did the intro, like welcome, and then Katt just went from there. Shannon, they had to say nothing else because Katt had it from there. Like, Lord. Okay. All right. Remind me not to piss him off. Let's see. Less likely said, to everyone in the chat in 24, stay healthy and mentally strong. You are worth it. Yes, please stay. Especially with all the crap going on, you guys have got to find ways to balance all the chaos. Find things that give you elements of euphoria and tranquility. Because if we spend too much time on just hardship and stress from work and how the world is always falling apart every 5 minutes and war and, you know, civil unrest, like it really does wear you down. You have got to balance that mess out because it's the only way. I think what pissed me off so much during the pandemic, I was trying to find a therapist so bad, but all of the therapists in 2020 were booked because everybody was trying to get them. So I was like, I'm gonna just hit. So my therapy was making music. I was in here just cranking, you know, because that was my escapism, especially when I thought for a minute that we were gonna be like in quarantine for a year. I was like, okay, all right, I like being with myself because I like my me time, but damn, I'm getting too much me time. I need to touch grass, right? All right. And y'all still cooking Drake on here. Starberry said, I'm an avid reader and my highest was 100 books in a year. 3,000 was sus to me. 3,000 is just a little too big because I mean, there's only 365 days in a year. That means you're reading 8, 9, 10 books a day. And then if you're a comedian and you're going on tour and you're working on your material and you're shooting movies, when would you have the time? That's what I was trying to figure out. But I mean, he was most of what he was saying, though, I was like, speak on it. It wasn't playing. Right. Haki23 said, we must do more than vote, which I 100% agree with. Those who can must be more civically involved. Thank you for sharing that. That's always our point. Voting is just one piece of the conversation, right? You know, if you are building a car, you got the wheels, but you got to put everything else on it. To me, voting is the wheels that keep everything moving, but you need everything else in the car to work. You need everything to work in favor for you to get somewhere, right? And get to where you're going. That's like everything has a role, right? So yeah, voting is not end all be all, and voting is not a marriage to the politician you voted for. You may vote for a politician and they may F up so many freaking times, but they still might be the better option compared to what else is on the table until you can find something else. So you got to learn to work the leverage you got and then put your feet to the fire with the politicians that are effing up. And hey, if they ain't doing it, good riddance. We'll bring somebody else in. Okay, I'm going to start winding down. I want to cover one last story and then we're going to keep it moving. Let me see here. And so make sure I got all my topics before I tell y'all we're winding down. There's one more that I think is really important that I want to cover. Okay, good. I got everything. Okay, the last thing I really want to jump into is the conversation around Brittany Watts. So let me pull up the article here. All right. So if you remember, now we know that, listen, when it comes to women's reproductive rights, you can stand where you stand on the conversation, but there's also a conversation about cruelty. And there's a conversation about just unreasonable policy and folks that are moving again, that conversation of ensuring and locking in a status quo and making sure that other people are collateral to the egos and the fragile, disposition of white conservative men that are in power right now. Right. So I want to read this article because this had me so pissed off. And it was interesting because there was another woman who was dealing with something similar, but the other woman got all the media attention and she didn't. All right. Ohio woman who miscarried at home won't be charged with corpse abuse. Grand jury decides. Columbus, Ohio. An Ohio woman facing a criminal charge for her handling of a home miscarriage will not be charged, a grand jury decided Thursday. The Trumbull County Prosecutor's Office said grand jurors declined to return an indictment for abuse of a corpse against Brittany Watts, 34, of Warren, resolving a case that sparked national attention for its implications for pregnant women as states across the country hashed out new laws governing reproductive health access and care in wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned. The announcement came hours before about 150 supporters gathered for a We Stand with Brittany rally on Warren's Courthouse Square. The event had been planned before Thursday's announcements of the grand jury decision. Watts was among several speakers who addressed the crowd. I want to thank my community, Warren, Ohio. I was born here. I was raised here. I graduated high school here, and I'm going to continue to stay here because I have to continue to fight. Watts' lawyer said an outpouring of emails, letters, calls, donations, and prayers from the public helped her client endure the ordeal of being charged with a felony punishable by up to a year in prison. No matter how shocking or disturbing it may sound when presented in a public forum, it is simply devastating the reality of a miscarriage, Attorney Tracy Timko said in a statement. While the last 3 months have been agonizing, we are incredibly grateful and relieved that justice was handed down by the grand jury today. A municipal judge had found probable cause to bind over Watts' case after city prosecutors said she miscarried, clogging the toilet and removing some of its contents to an outdoor trash area, then left the house, leaving the 22-week-old fetus lodged in the pipes. Watts had visited Mercy Health St. Joseph's Hospital, a Catholic facility in working-class Warren, about 60 miles southeast of Cleveland. Twice in the days leading up to her miscarriage, the doctor had told her she was carrying a non-viable fetus and to have her labor induced or risk I cannot read tonight, and have, let me just start that all over. All right, hooked on phonics works for me. Her doctor had told her she was carrying a non-viable fetus and to have her labor induced or significant risk of death, according to the records of the case. Due to the delays and other complications, her attorney said she left each time without being treated. After she miscarried, she tried to go to a hair appointment, but friends sent her to a hospital. A nurse called 911 to report a previously pregnant patient had returned to reporting the baby in her backyard in a bucket. That call launched a police investigation that led to the eventual charge against Watts. Warren's assistant prosecutor told the municipal court judge Terry the issue wasn't how the child died, when the child died, but the fact that the baby was put in the toilet, which was large enough to clog the toilet, left the toilet, and she went on with her day. Let's see. When Ivanchik bound the case over, he said, there are better scholars than I am to determine the exact legal status of this fetus, corpse body, or birthing tissue, or whatever it is. County prosecutor Dennis Watkins said in a statement that the county's prosecutors respectfully disagree with the lower court's application of the law after their follow-up investigation found Watts committed no crime. Okay, this article keeps going. I'm actually going to stop there. But long story short, what's very interesting with that is, one, I think as men, we will never know the experience of having to carry a child that does not come to term. We're just never going to know it. That's not going to be our experience, right? We're never going to have to carry a child. We're never going to have to go through the complications of pregnancy. We're never going to have to deal with our bodies going through hormonal changes, which means everything on our bodies change, right? Everything changes. Depending on who you are, how your genetics are. Some people get pregnant, their skin gets darker in some areas. Some women, their stomach is a totally different color than the rest of their body. Some women, their hair starts falling out after they give birth if they stop taking prenatal vitamins. Because again, the baby is when you've been carrying a child this whole time and you give birth, everything in your body shifts. And so sometimes for women, if they haven't been taking the prenatal vitamins, even after giving birth, a lot of times they start losing a lot of their hair, right? For a lot of women, and I hate to be graphic, but a lot of times women have to push. Sometimes if they are not dilated enough, and we're all adults here, so we can have this conversation. Sometimes they have to be cut in that area so that they can make room for the baby's head. I just need us to really look at the experience of what it is to push out a child, right? And so having to deal with that. And then running the risk of a lot of times, sometimes the baby is breached, right? Now the baby's upside down. They got to figure out how to do whatever in the conversation of a C-section and going through that. And yes, even though you're wide awake and you're numbed and everything, they can still smell the burning flesh. They still feel the pressure of doctors going in and pulling things and yanking things. And when women have to give birth, whether through the canal, I'll use that term, or whether it's through C-section, then all the organs and stuff have to literally be reorganized and put back into place how they were. And women who get C-sections, when they get the stitches, sometimes the stitches are too tight and women can never properly stretch this area the same way again. The muscles are pretty much collapsed, and that idea of trying to get back a six-pack ab will never happen again because those muscles have been compromised. Like, there's so many things that take place. And then when we just talk about the risk that takes place when it comes to giving birth, possibly dying on the table, postpartum preeclampsia, all of these different things that exist. As men, we just aren't going to have to deal with it. The best thing we can do is stand in the hospital and hold her hand and get cussed out. That's about it. right? And even for women giving birth, sometimes even the humiliation of when they have to push, sometimes additional things come out of different holes with the baby, right? That's a very uncomfortable space to be in. And so I think what has happened, sadly, when we talk about these conversations of women's reproductive rights, or what happens is everything has become so punitive. And again, people latch onto, again, this fake idea of all of a sudden we're so religious, we're so spiritual, we love, this is what I'm like, cut the crap. Because y'all, again, these same folks who are so spiritual and everything else, y'all are all about pro-life and the baby and this, that, and third. Then the baby gets here and y'all get pissed off when people need help. Y'all cut programs, you gut everything. I was just looking at, let me see here, just to prove my point really quick. And I promise I'm gonna bring it right back to where it's supposed to be. Where's that one at? Is it this one? So make sure I got it right. Where was I was going somewhere with this. Stay with me. Governor Tate Reeves, office of Mississippi, that's the governor of Mississippi, says they will not participate in a federal summer food program for children because of the desire to reject attempts to expand the welfare state. Right? Nonsense. Let me continue. 15 GOP governors deny kids in their state a $40 per month food program during summer recess. Kim Reynolds of Iowa, the place that just had their caucus, denied it because she's concerned about the childhood obesity epidemic. How are we worried about childhood obesity if they're not eating, right? So again, people will sit here and jump into all of this nonsense and oh, we must protect the light. And then as soon as the baby get here, it's some nonsense. So now when we flip the script and we talk about women who miscarry, okay, I will be very transparent. And my mother said it's fine that I share this. So like, understand, my mother had been trying to have kids since probably 1981, right? I don't know what her health condition was, but she had so many miscarriages that she lost count after 8. Fortunately, I showed up and I was a complicated pregnancy. Complicated. Even when it was time to push, I would not come out. They had to get the forceps and literally pull me out. So if you look closely, I don't know if the right here, this is the mark from the forceps, and then on this side right here, this little gash by my nose is like the forceps. Those are the permanent scars from them having to just pull me out because I would not come out, right? Then my mom was sick and was in like the ICU for like 2 weeks after I was born. And so when we're talking about people who unfortunately miscarry, miscarriages happen all the time. It's actually very common. The challenge is later term miscarriages are not as common, but think about how traumatizing that is when you've made it to the second trimester and you miscarry. Because, a lot of times they tell you don't announce the baby till you make it to the second trimester because there's still a chance that the body may reject the fetus and so on and so forth. And, still don't start picking colors and stuff yet. So think of the trauma that takes place once you start miscarrying in second and third trimesters. After you've kind of started to bond, you've kind of started to make different milestones. There's different things that are happening. You're starting to connect. And the trauma of going to a hospital, the doctor's telling you pretty much the baby's going to be dead when it comes out, so let's go ahead and take it out now. But they can't get you in to actually perform the service, and time pushes on, and unfortunately, you miscarry at home, right? And so to sit there and criminalize a woman and punish her for a fetus that didn't make it, and try to say, well, it was cruelty to the body, to this, that, and the third. The cruelty was when y'all didn't give her the services she needed to begin with. The cruelty of having to keep sending her home with a child that is pretty much stillborn, that is not going to make it, and expect her to just maneuver through society. And unfortunately, Mother Nature did its Mother Nature thing, and now you're mad at how she responded. By her leaving and going about her day, that might have been a way that might have been her way of healing temporarily. She might have been in shock. That might have been her way of saying, this is too much for me. Let me get to something that's normal. I know when my father died, right away, the first thing I wanted to do was just get to a new norm. So I was acting like it didn't happen, and I was moving around like I was good, and I wasn't. Right? I was even making YouTube videos, giving y'all advice on how to deal with a parent after they pass. And so, understand, everybody's experience is different. So to sit here and politicize her experience and then try to lock her up because she was not successful at carrying a child to term, it's already stressful enough. Going back to miscarrying, the idea of a child not making it and you still having to push it out. I think a lot of us think that when you miscarry, the baby just disappears and you just go about your day. No, that got to come out. Everything. And then your body is still going through all these different hormonal changes because for weeks and sometimes months, your body is still operating like it's carrying a baby, and it's not. And so your body's still doing all these things that don't even really add up or match up. So again, to watch all these white men break their necks to go after this black woman and try to paint her to be the face of everything wrong with America, I got a problem with it. I am glad that they threw all those charges out. It should have never went to a grand jury to begin with, right? I think that's so stupid. And again, just because we've seen how this country moves, they don't care about people anyway. They don't care about the poor. They don't care about the well-being of anybody. They don't care about healthcare. They vote down everything, right? All of these people who are in charge, they're against healthcare. They're against regulating the food. Our food is barely regulated. There's so much crap in our food, and so bad, too bad, so sad. It is what it is, right? There's so many things that are just ridiculous. When we're talking about emissions and what's in the air, everybody's fighting the gut and change the rules on emission to make them a little bit more loose so people can make more money. Right? There's all these different things that take place that affect everybody collectively when it comes to the air that we breathe, when it comes to our health, when it comes to everything, and these people don't care. So to sit there and pretend all of a sudden you cared about a fetus that didn't make it, that was already dead, cut the crap. That pissed me off so much when I read that. And the fact that they were really trying to lock this woman up for miscarrying, when in reality, if we want to talk about accountability in me is a hospital knowing this woman's going to miscarry any day and you still send her home. Okay, it's different from somebody who is in their first trimester and the doctor knows that they're going to miscarry, but the baby is like the size of this, you know, as opposed to a size of a coffee mug. Like, I need people to be for real. All right, I'm going to stop right there. All right, I had a few more topics, but we've already been on here for a little too long, so I'm going to wind down with my heavy topics. We'll chop it up for a little bit and call it a night. Kira said, love Sinbad, comedic legend. He's one of my favorites. My favorite story was always the story he told about trying to sneak in past curfew in the 70s. That is so funny. Please watch that on YouTube. When he said that when you're in the wrong, even the birds be calling you Sinbad. I was like, what? That was hilarious. Let's see. Yes, Jay, it's been snowing all day. So yes, I get to stay home. I don't got to get up early. Well, I still got to get up early to work, but I don't got to get up earlier to commute to work. Amen. Let's see. Yes, Cap came with all the smoke. Jenny Bean says Shannon's most viewed video. I don't even know how many views that has, but it was up to like 15 million views in like a day. Like, that is, there's viral, and then there's just everybody's talking about it. I will say, to me, that might have been one of the first collective experiences that have taken place in a long time. When I say collective experience, I'm talking about like the idea of back in the day when everybody wanted to know who shot JR with Dallas. Like that kind of collective experience. Or, you know, everybody was watching The Simpsons. Everybody wanted to know who shot Mr. Burns when they started the next season. That kind of thing where everybody's talking about it. Even people who don't do social media were asking and talking about, you know, Katt Williams. Even my mom was texting me like, what's going on with the Katt Williams guy? Because my mom is so out of the loop on everything with pop culture. It's so funny to me. So she used to call Beyonce Bounce. I told this story one time back in the day. They didn't let me go to the TLC concert, and I was pissed off because this one, my mom was like super religious. She was like, no, because if the Rapture come back, then they up there shaking. No, then where you gonna be? And mind you, TLC wasn't even that kind of group. Okay, they were dancing. They weren't up here shaking and thrusting. So anyway, I didn't get to go to the concert. I'm still pissed. Key Arena, January 10th, 2000, 7:30 p.m. Still pissed about it. And so, you know, Left Eye died some years later. And I was like, dang, Mom, now I'll never get to see my group because y'all wouldn't let me go. You know, so her way of apologizing was she bought me the Destiny's Child Survivor concert DVD. And at the time, I didn't like Destiny's Child. So I was like, Mom, this is not the same group. And she was like, what? Bounce isn't in TLC? No, Mom, it's not the same group, man. Damn. Destiny's Child's cool now. I just didn't care for them as much during Survivor. But yeah, it's so funny. She's out of the loop with everything. So funny. All right. Calvin, would you wear a dress in a movie? Absolutely not. Let's see. And I will say with that dress conversation, there's layers to that conversation too, because I think some people are moving a little weird with that too. I'm going to do that in a separate video because I don't want to just have a sound bite and people interpret it the wrong way. I wouldn't necessarily do that, but there's some conversations around that as well. Some serious ones. I think FD Signifier. Actually, no, I'm not even doing it. FD Signifier just did a video on that. Watch his. Anyway. Bonita Gardner said, men should not have anything to do with decisions about a woman's body, period. That's where I'm at with it. Like, leave it alone. Unless we're going to start carrying children, shut up about it. It's not your place to judge. It's not your place to try to regulate. Veronica Smith said, "You're so close to death when pregnant. Like, so many things can go wrong, right? So many things, and or especially if something gets torn the wrong way and now you're bleeding and can't stop, and you still got to keep pushing. And they're trying. And I hate to be so graphic, but let's be for real here. We're adults, right? You know, you're bleeding. They're trying to control bleeding, but you still have to keep pushing because now the baby's suffocating. Because understand, once the sac and all that is starting to come out, and water and the fluids, and they're coming out, and the umbilical cord might be wrapped around the neck. You're racing against time. The quickest part of the delivery is when the baby gets pushed out. It's the contractions and the labor and everything else leading up to that takes a good minute. That's when they're in the hospital bed for 36 hours and everything. The pushing part is, boop, 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 boop. I mean, it's not that easy, but I mean, that by that point, women are like, get it out of me already. I'm done, right? So there's so many layers to all of that. And I think so many people just don't have the education on that conversation and just be out here loud, strong, and wrong. Somebody said our milk is banned in 80 countries. I don't drink milk. I never liked it. Couldn't do it. Sorry. I mean, I'll drink the other substitutions, but dairy just don't work with me. And milk would really have me messed up. Oh, y'all are saying bye, Vivek. Did he drop out the election? Let me see, because if boy, listen. Oh, I'm gonna be terrible on here. I'm gonna be terrible on here. Let me see here. Did he quit yet? Has he quit yet? Oh, he quit. He's endorsed Trump for president. I knew he's going to do that. See, now he's trying to secure his vice president option. He's hoping Trump will bring him on as vice president. Mm. 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 Play silly games, win silly prizes. And so that's Vivek Ramaswamy, who I was just talking about earlier. You did all of that. You did all of that. And look what $10 million in Iowa. And the fact that you had to drop out in the first race. Some people will at least ride it out a few states. They'll at least try to get to Super Tuesday. And if it's going bad, I'm like, all right, I quit. Iowa got you together. The way things work. The way things work. The way things work. Huh. Yeah, suspended that campaign. I'm gonna play the lottery this week because I've been speaking some things into fruition. So I'm gonna make sure I play them numbers. They got the drawing on Wednesday. Whoo. They said, QK79 said, who did your mom mix TLC up with? My mom thought TLC and Destiny's Child were the same group. She didn't. Like, my mom really, because my mom, when she was really heavy into the church, she only listened to gospel, and she listened to some old school. So she listened to Patty, Aretha, sometimes Luther. That was about as spicy as she got. So she really was out of the loop with everything in pop culture in the 90s and early 2000s. So now she's playing catch up. And her favorite song, which is so funny but corny to me, is Mr. Boombastic from Shaggy. I'm like, Mom, this song is like 35 years old. She loves that song. Boy, don't get her started on that song. I'm like, oh, okay. She likes that and the remix. I think what it is, she likes because it has that Marvin Gaye sample in it. I think that's what makes her like it. But and it might also be because her fiance is Jamaican, so she loves that song. I got to play that Boombastic. I'm like, all right. And it's so funny because back in the day, I remember when I was finally old enough to drive and stuff, she would nag about whatever music I was playing in the car. And I purposely made sure to not play like music that had too much profanity. And my friend today had me laughing because she did the same thing I used to do. Like, if you're playing like a song with your mom in the car and I'm like 15, 16, 17, or not 15. I was like 17, 18. And, they start cussing in the car. You try to talk over the music so they can't hear the cuss word. I used to do that. So yeah, she's playing catch up on a lot of stuff. Oh, it's at 49 million views now. Wow, man. I don't know what I would do if I had that many views. I knew I would know not to read the comments section. I know that. Man. Yeah, Vivek is gonna cry in the car. He's gonna cry in the car. Now, I hope he does not try to turn into like Edward Bloom and have a vendetta against everybody. And now he's going to start trying to, again, fight and compromise legislation and ruin things for everybody else. But yep, Vivek, see how that works? Silly games, silly games. I be knowing what I'm talking about. Don't play with me. Man. All right, so I'm gonna I think that's the majority of the stories I wanted to cover. I have a few other ones, but we've covered enough heavy stuff. So I'm gonna leave that be. So we will chop it up for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna call it a night. I have been in go mode since December 18th, just trying to get stuff done. Like when I tell y'all I'm so tired, I'm exhausted, but it's gonna pay off. Like we have been putting in so much work with some of the projects I've been working on. I mean, it's just I didn't get to really have a Christmas vacation. I took some PTO, but I ended up working through all of it. So it was like I got back to work. And you know, like when people have been on vacation, everybody's in a good mood. Oh, Happy New Year, welcome. I'm coming in there. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Great. Like tired, right? Sunny Bear, is there a possibility that we can get another So What Happened? I love your R&B retrospectives. It's coming. I've learned to just stop giving dates because I never make the date on time. But Mariah is coming. Like I said, I had to move around a whole lot in my life to just get a few projects done first. Those had to come. They had to take precedent because those cost money, and money talks. When you are executive producing some stuff, money talks, and you got to move with the wind. So I'm knocking that out. I'm trying to get the Mariah wrapped up, but like I said, I'm also working on the New Jack Swing music retrospective as well, just because I think so many people have that genre mixed up. And so it's actually the research on that I've been doing is pretty dope. There's some really cool things I learned. And I'm even learning there's even an element that ties into K-pop. We talk about, because I'm not gonna tell it all, but there are 3 waves of New Jack Swing. And I think people who weren't around kind of just put it all in one conversation. So they think like the New Jack Swing of a Michael Jackson, Remember the Time, is the same New Jack Swing as a Full Force Annie, I Want You. So like it jumps into all that, but we'll get to it another time, right? Anyway. Dickerson said, I thought you quit your job. No, I transitioned into another field of work. So I was with the kids until April, from August of 2022 till August of 2011 till April of 2020, or May of 2022. And then I switched into a new field, but I still support the center, but I get to do it in the capacity that I want to, as opposed to having to deal with the politics of the company and stuff. So it's kind of cool. I know my old coworkers get annoyed because every time I show up, it's like I'm the fun uncle. I just get to go in there and do all the fun stuff. And so they like, oh, here he comes with some donuts, and or they always got me fixing and rebuilding a bookshelf or something. So I get to do that. But no, I work in a totally different field, and I'm never gonna tell you what it is. No, just kidding. No, it's more in a creative aspect. So I get to do a lot more creative things. So the cool thing is like the work that I've done on like YouTube and with music and everything else kind of benefited and set up what I do now, which is kind of cool. But no, I love the kids. Podcast is coming too. Like Omega, like I told y'all on the last live, my goal was I was going to use that time to get the next podcast episode out, get Mariah ready, drop the New Jack Swing doc, and then that executive producer had to come on for some unrelated stuff, and I had to get that stuff handled. So now we're playing catch up. So honestly, I'm gonna tell y'all right now, February is probably looking better as far as like that kind of content. February is not happening in January. Don't look for it. It's not coming in January. It's not. I got too many deadlines coming, and we are fighting and clawing to get to that final stretch, and I can't miss those deadlines. So something has to take a back seat temporarily, right? And so, yes, in the meantime, it's coming. But I will say the Mariah one is definitely worth the wait. Like that might be the best one I've made so far. All right. Let's see. Where are we at here? Oh, Natural Empress said, big up to her island. All right, Jamaica. We see you. Coogie 90 or 79 said, well, Shaggy and TLC were on tour together last year. Y'all should have gone to see them together. But see, me and my mom don't live in the same city because I'm in DC. She's in Atlanta Metro. And so, yeah, plus, I would have paid to see TLC, but I don't want to sit through Shaggy. I'm sorry. I couldn't do it. They had another show they were on. I think it was them in Vogue. I want to say Sean Kingston. Oh, maybe that's the same show. I think Sean Kingston was just the 4th person, like Shaggy. I think we talked about this. And I was like, yeah, I want to see them. But I've already seen them before. I saw them in 2014. It was a great show. It was around the time the movie was out. So everybody was interested in TLC again. So they had, they had a budget where they could do some shows again. And so I got to see them then. And I was good after that. So I wasn't pressed to go to this show, but I heard it was a good time. And their shows have actually gotten better in the last few years. So, I like that they try to continue to enhance what it is that they can do. To me, to be able to continue after you lose 1/3 of the group and still be able to perform and sell out venues and stuff, that's good for them, especially, almost 20 years plus after their peak. Good for them. All right. Nothing from media regarding Sudan, Ethiopia, and the Congo. Yep, and I talked about that a few times as well. Like, it's interesting to see which stories take all the headlines. And I think the reason why we're seeing so much in regard to everything with Israel and Gaza, mind you, I don't like the way that it's being reported on, because it's still being reported as if the atrocities happening to the people of Gaza are supposed to happen and they're justified. That's pissing me off, because they're not. That's ridiculous. That's some nonsense. But because the United States and Israel have so many interests together in regard to finance and politics and military industrial complex, yeah, this is why you're not hearing as much about Sudan or the Congo or Ethiopia, right? And even before what happened with Israel and Palestine, you still really weren't hearing about that. They pick and choose what they're going to value. It goes back to our conversation we had earlier in this live about Japan and the Hiroshima maidens, right? Yeah, somebody said Chili dances and looks exactly like she did in her heyday. Yeah, Chili looks great. She doesn't drink either. She only drinks water. Like, she doesn't do alcohol. She doesn't do a whole bunch of things. She's really into health and fitness, so she looks great. She doesn't smoke. So she's an example of, you take care of yourself, you can age well. And some of that's genetics for some folks, because some people do exactly the same thing, and they still unfortunately shrivel up like a prune. It's life. We age. Beauty fades, but some people are given the grace to look really great for longer periods of time. And I don't think she's been to the doctor's office to touch this. So yeah, she looks great. I think T-Boz looks great as well, with the experiences that she's had to be on. Her having to take all those steroids because of the brain tumor and battling with sickle cell. She looks really great too. So, all right. Okay, let's see. I'll do a few more minutes and then I'm going to bed, because I've been up since 6 this morning. Yeah, so the guys, I appreciate y'all for hanging with me tonight. I know I was going for a good minute. I was trying to get back earlier, but like I said, that executive producer hat is no joke, right? But I'm looking forward to sharing a lot of the things I've been working on for the last year and a half. It's not even just the short film, but it's a few other things too. So yeah, like I said, it's gonna be a fun year for me and you guys if you're into what I like to do. Let's see here. What are we talking about? Trying to catch up with my chat. Somebody said, Vivek, did he really think white people saw him as white? He just, I just think a lot of folks think that as long as you just say what they want to hear, you're going to make it in, right? Think about, like, going back to my opening act analogy, right? Sometimes with the opening act, the crowd might not be as responsive, and what they'll say is like, are you guys ready to see it? They'll say who the headliner is, and then the whole arena's like, all right, cool. They about to be out in a minute. We about to give you all this new one right quick, and then the crowd sits on back down like, okay, here we go. That's kind of Vivek in this situation, right? He thought he really thought he had a shot in this. It's just like, y'all are gonna learn every time. He is Bobby. Well, at least Bobby Jindal won his governor's election in Louisiana. Bobby Jindal 2.0. And please go back and look at Bobby Jindal's portrait, right? He lightened his skin about now, mind you, Bobby Jindal was about my complexion. By the time you see that portrait, he was looking like this. I said, now y'all out here just playing games. Y'all out here playing games. Now, who are you trying to fool? I hate that so many people are so compromised, and that the idea of white supremacy has done such a number on the world that literally every marginalized group feels that they have to become something they're not to make it in this world. I think that sucks. Absolutely not. And the thing is, I mean, his policy was some nonsense, but understand, just because you are not white does not mean you can't win in politics. You can still gain a coalition. But the problem is, somebody like Vivek pissed off every group except white folks. And he didn't even realize that he didn't even have leverage with them because they had 2, 3, 4 other choices before they could get to him, right? And what's funny is I feel like even if Christie would have stayed in the election, Christie might have probably polled higher than Vivek in Iowa, to be honest. But oh well, that's not my party, not my interest. But I do keep an eye on what they got going over there, so I know what kind of craziness I got to pay attention for. I'm not looking forward to 2024. I told y'all I might be skipping most of it. I ain't got the energy. I really don't. I'm the way I'm gonna have the whole election muted in like 2 more months. I don't want to talk about it. Don't ask me nothing. Somebody said everyone's afraid to speak up on these topics. That'd be pissing me off too. It's like just you got to get to a space where once you have enough people who aren't afraid to just say things like they really are, the idea of like, because even with this, like, look at how the conversation with Gaza has shifted. For years, nobody even would utter a word or give any criticism to Israel because it's the idea of being seen as, anti-Semitic, as opposed to no, we just don't support the idea of like Zionism and how it's done what it's done, right? But everything got put under the blanket. People were getting blacklisted. It was almost like McCarthyism, right? It goes back to what I said about Jennifer Aniston and Jamie Foxx. When he made whatever post he made and Jennifer Aniston thought it was something anti-Semitic and made this whole, mind you, he wasn't even talking to her. Here she comes. One thing I don't support. And she says this whole hoopla about everything. I'm like, y'all are so over performative. And, she was ready to throw Jamie to the wolves. And Jamie wasn't even talking about what she thought it was. Like, that's how crazy things are. But I think when you get enough people who are willing to call out the nonsense, less people are afraid about calling it out. And so I think with Gaza, this time people are like, why are we spending money to blow up civilians? We're blowing up people who barely, I don't even think they technically have an official army. Like, what are y'all doing over there? There's nothing left. There's nothing but rubble. And why are we, with all of the problems in the United States, right? You already got the nonsense we still dealing with Ukraine and Russia and still trying to pay all of that off. And now you're throwing money over here and everything. The entire world is saying ceasefire. The entire world is saying cut this crap. And here we go vetoing everything. Nope, we got to get over it. We will stand strong. And then at the same time, now we jump in with Taiwan and what they got going on. We will stand strong against China. All this we. Where y'all get that we from? like that meme. Like, chill. Especially with the current president. I'd be like, Joe, I'm not even trying to be rude, but you are setting us up to jump into some more nonsense. And my thing about that is like, I don't know how Father Time operates for everybody, but my thing is, if you are not going to be here for the end result of the policy you put in there, make sure you're not signing up for stuff that's going to be detrimental to everybody else. So like I said, it's a mess right now. Everybody get on my nerves. Tired of everybody. I've had it. I can't take this no more. Man. Tired of everybody. Yeah, 2024, in my opinion, will be the worst election we've ever had to live through, as far as how nasty it's going to get, as far as the attempts for corruption that will take place, as far as the misinformation and disinformation that's going to be out there, as far as different movements that are going to randomly pop up and gain leverage and gain followings and lead people into nothingness, like that normally happen every election season. It's going to be a time. So like I said, use your gift of discernment. That's all I got. Thank you, Kia. She said, you are so talented. May God bless you, Calvin. I appreciate it. All right. I'm going to wind down on here. Yeah, even stupid Ron DeSantis was talking about, what did he say? He doesn't understand why there was a mosque in Bethlehem or something. I'm like, y'all don't even understand civics and how the world works and how, what was it? I can't. And these people are so stupid, just stupid. All right. Yeah, Jennifer Aniston was tripping with that one. I don't know where that came from. Yes. Adnerb Nora said Project 2025. I think I talked about that on the last live or the live before that. But yeah, there's a whole lot going on. Like I said, that discernment, this is when that discernment bug needs to kick in and folks need to really pay attention to what's happening out here because there's so much going on. Anyway, I'm going to wind down. I hate that this entire live was like real heavy, but I tried to balance it out. Anyway, like I said, stay safe, stay sane, mind your business so that you can age well, right? And anyway, like I said, I am looking forward to 2024. I can't wait to share a lot of cool things with you guys. Hopefully you all have the great 2024. Let's just let this be a wonderful year. Let us put it into the universe that this will be a year of greatness for all of us, right? Good times, clear skin, bank accounts flowing, love for some of us, right? Anyway, I'm out. Good night. See you guys later.